Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be reading Chapter 8 of In Miserable Slavery, the Thomas Thistlewood Diaries. Unhappily Laboring on the Pen. Introduction. Any account of life and labor during slavery, we are at In any account of life and labor during slavery, we are at a tremendous disadvantage. The slaves, the vast majority of whose activities we set out to describe or to discuss, are silent except by report. And the report is, for the most part, given by their masters. How much can we accept that Thistlewood tells us about his slaves as persons or even as property? In 1760, for instance, he and his white associates speak of Negro rebel leaders. What would the slaves have described them? Would the slaves have described them in this way? This is not to say that Thistlewood lied. He was simply recording his view of the matter. Indeed, there is much in his diaries to suggest that he was forthright and honest, but it is doubtful whether he always understood what the slaves did or said or thought. We can, therefore, accept without much hesitation his statements of what occurred, but we have always to be wary when he attempts to say why something was said or done by them. At the same time, as we have seen, Thistlewood's diaries are, for the most part, a recording of what rather than of why. Equally, for in fact, we are in a different way removed from the slaves of the 18th century. We should be wary of putting our interpretations on what they said and did. In simple illustration, neither they nor Mr. Thistlewood would have had the same understanding of labor relations as we do today, nor would they have regarded the infliction of punishment by the lash in the same with the same repugnance and sense of personal humiliation that we feel today. It was then a common form of penalty served on the free as well as the slaves. Nonetheless, we must use what information we have, and there is much to be learned about Mr. Thistlewood and his slaves from his accounts. There are few other sources which allow us so intimate an introduction to individual men and women among our enslaved ancestors, and in the case of some, to feel that we begin to know them as persons, not just as names. On January 1st, 1770, Thistlewood owned 26 slaves, of whom four, Abba, Bess, Damsel, and Jimmy, were house and personal attendants. 16, named Lincoln, Solon, Dick, Cujo, Caesar, Pompey, Johnny, Sally, Suki, Maria, Myrtilla, Frankie, Phoebe, Peggy, Nanny, and Cuba, were field slaves. Chubb was a fisherman, a job which no one seemed to keep for long. Excuse me, and five were children. Abba's Mary, born December 1761, Johnny, born April 1764, and Neptune, born November 1766. Nanny's Fibba, born August of 1765, and Maria's Lucy, born November of 1766. As might be expected, Most of the information about individual concerns the house slaves and those field slaves who were more intractable. Of the other adults, mentions are made of their illnesses, their labors on particular days, their misdemeanors and punishments, and their running away. The children almost entirely go without notice except for births, illnesses, and deaths. In the following account, all notices of serious illnesses, punishments, and running away are recorded. Comparatively minor ailments and the details of every day's work are illustrated by the occasional references below. More specific information about births, matchmaking, and deaths is given in the subsequent accounts of individual slaves. So, as you can see, he documented what he documented, but we can't know everything. Saturday, January the 13th, 1770, gave my Negroes today. Thursday, January 25th, 1770, carrying penguin plants from the garden to fence in the old Negro ground once more and enlarge it somewhat. February 19th, 1770, hoeing over the old Negro ground, digging holes for goat house posts, and bringing plantain suckers from Vine's garden to plant in the provision ground. Sunday, February 25th, 1770, wrote to overseer of Friendship Estate by my Negroes, whom I got away at 3 p.m. Mr. Hayward's Negroes are to meet them there to work at 3 bits per day, sent 16 Negroes. Greetings, Anthony McPhail. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. On Monday, April 30th, 1770, he kept all his people at the pen for a week and sent them to Hill at Egypt, where he had been given permission to cut and carry as much thatch as he needed. On Sunday, May 13th, 1770, he notes, "They have done with Mr. Hayward's Negroes and mine at Friendship, it seems, but did not acquaint the Negroes, so they had to go back and fetch their tools. 1682 days at 3 bits equals 157 pounds, 13 shillings, and 9 dittos. Mine, 921 days equals 86 pounds, 6 shillings, 10 and a half dittos. Cujo lost me 2 days, Johnny 5, Caesar 1, Nanny and Cuba a half day each." So he was documenting their working record and how much money they were able to generate. We're going to take this slow tonight because this is a long chapter. Early in June, the goat house was ready and he brought 33 goats from Mr. Hayward at 23 pounds, 15 shillings. Pompey was put to look after them. On Monday, July 2nd of 1770, Sally tending the corn, Suki and Myrtilla weeding the garden, Pompey has the day, and Caesar is minding the goats. Maria and Dick lame, Cuba run away, and Lincoln given a ticket and sent in search. Chubb fishing, but brought none. Cujo, Salome, Johnny, Frankie, Phoebe, Nanny, and Peggy are cleaning the pasture. Wednesday, July 11th, 1770, at noon, served my Negroes some salt. I wonder, does he mean as a meal? Saturday, July 14th, 1770, gave my Negroes today as they are starving. As they are starving? Sunday, July 22nd, 1770. On this day, Johnny died. Saturday, September 22nd, 1770. In the morning, finding a vast of corn sticks pulled up by the roots, and the best of corn gone among the crab thatch by lime kiln provision ground side. Flogged all my field negroes well, except Phoebe, Frankie, Myrtilla, and Peggy, whom don't so much suspect. Monday, September 24th, 1770. That morning, I set traps of nails and boards in the pass through the crab thatch against lime kiln provision ground, acquainted all of my negroes of them. Friday, October 19th, 1770. This morning, shared the lime kiln provision ground amongst my negroes. Thus, stuck a line from the southmost stile post to a young alligator pear tree in Abba's line. Abba's ground remains the same. Beginning at the stile, south side, first there was Jimmy, Damsel, Bess, and Sally. Second, there was Lincoln and Suki. Third, there was Maria and Solon, excuse me. Fourth, there was Dick and Myrtilla. Fifth, there was Frankie and Phoebe. North side returning. Sixth, there was Peggy. Seventh, there was Cujo and Chubb. Eighth, there was Nanny. Ninth, there was Caesar. 10th, there was Cuba and Pompey. Gave the Negroes the rest of today and tomorrow to plant and put their grounds in order. So he gave them an opportunity to cultivate the fields that he was giving them. Saturday, November 1770. At night, served my Negroes 10 jumpers, which are much like herrings, each, and gave Lincoln, Solon, and Cujo some rum and a bit apiece as some reward for their loss of time. The others had had the day, but these three had been sent off to try and find Thistlewood's bull, Roger, which he had small shotted the night before in the provision ground. It had run off into the morass. So he was rewarding them. So there's this interesting relationship between money and the enslaved and the enslaver, because he was giving them money for some of their tasks. And in some instances, his enslaved people made loans to him. So how were they able to make loans to him? What did they do with their money? How was money used in this slave economy? Anthony McPhail says, in celebration of Black Women's Her Story Month, we commemorate the life of Josina Nachal Mozambique, Queen, Mozambican freedom fighter who went to the ancestors on this day in 1971 at the age of 25. Yes, we do. On Sunday, November the 11th, 14 hands sent to work at Friendship. Pompey at home tending the goats. Dick, too full of the yaws to be sent. Abba, Bess, Damsel, and Jimmy about the house. On Monday, December 3rd, Dick and Bess were minding the goats. Cujo, Frankie, and Myrtilla were ill. Myrtilla had been whipped for not coming home with the others on Sunday and then given awards Red Hill. I wonder what awards Red Hill is. Cuba was still run away, and Solon was out with a ticket looking for her. So only 9 at Friendship. On the 17th, Cuba having returned, was sent off to Friendship, but 8 hands were employed on the King's Road by the Styx Bridge. After the Christmas break, the road work being done, all who were fit were back at Friendship, and on the last day of the year, there were 14 there. On Monday, April the 29th, 1771, Lincoln at home digging in the garden, Chubb dressing for crab yaws, Pompey minding the goats, and Dick of the yaws. 11 hands at Friendship. Wrote to Mr. Hayward by Jimmy and sent Cuba to have a collar and hook, pot hook put on her. That afternoon, sent her to Friendship with Jimmy. Now, a pot hook, a pat hook, or a patoo was a triangular yoke put on the necks of animals to prevent them from straying. So it's an iron collar locked around a person's neck to prevent them from straying. And they called it a pot hook. Planted a bed of English marrow fat peas in my garden. Also planted an acorn. The morass coming down this evening. Some water in my morass duck pond. Sent John to school on Mackie by Bess. Last night, when I went to bed, perceived a pain in my left side, which increased in the night. Feel it yet, am not much well. At night, come, Fibber. So here he goes again, off on his sexual exploits of making these women deal with him sexually when he's not in the best of health. On Thursday, August the 8th, Salon, Dick, Cujo, Chubb, Frankie, Suki, Peggy, and Cuba were sent to Savannah Lamar to bring home lumber purchased for the pen. The Negroes, having loitered them very much time away and not coming home till late, flogged them all. 2 days before, the whole field gang had been flogged for laziness and other petty offenses. On the 4th of September, they were again flogged, this time for making a path through the penguins I lately planted in the line between Mr. Say and me. So I wonder were they doing that on purpose? On Tuesday, October the 1st, 1771, that morning I rode out to Savannah Lamar. A sale of Negroes on board a ship today by Mr. Huey, but I could not get on board. And it's no matter, as Vassal, Wedderburn, Myler, and Graham are to have the pick. Wednesday, October 2nd, 1771. The remainder of the new Negroes brought ashore. Mr. Huey asked me for £50 and the duty each for a little boy and girl, near children, a poor choice, so bought none. Monday, January the 13th, 1772, the Negroes at home making mortar, pulling up weeds in the pasture and other tasks, breaking in corn in the rock hole provision ground, 2 sorts of guinea corn and barberry wheat. But it is in a manner all eat up by the clings, parakeets, pea and ground doves, vines, fowls, and others. A cattle has also been in last night. In mid-September, in between 2 seasons of labor at Retrieve Estate, the field slaves were again at home. Abba, Bess, and Damsel, the 3 house slaves, were all lying in at the Negro house. Abba had recently had Jenny, born August 25th. Bess was with Bristol, born the 29th of August. And Damsel was with Nellie, born September 11th. Old Leandra was attending them. Salon and Sally had yaws, and Frankie, Maria, Cujo, and Peggy were all, in some degree, unwell. I wonder were they unwell because he kept having sex with them. Greetings, Bawana Haguziki. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. I wonder were they all in some degree of unwellness because he kept having sex with them, right? And then they were having sex with each other. On Monday, the 21st of December, rode to Savannah Lamar, went aboard the Guinea Snow, but Mr. Murray sold his Negroes too dear, meaning the price was too high. Mr. Herring gave about 64 pounds and duty, which is 20 shillings, for 35 Negroes. Mr. Leslie gave 68 pounds per head for privileged Negroes, right? They asked 60 pounds for the women and 52 and the duty for girls not 10 years old and got it also Ebos. Now privileged Negroes were considered to be the best quality in a cargo of slaves. The best quality in a cargo of slaves. On Sunday, April the 18th, served my Negroes their Osnabrück year cloth, or masters, thank ye. In May of 1773, Mr. Thistlewood got rid of his goats. They had proved to be a dreadful nuisance, running all over the place, through the gardens and provision grounds, and through the penguin fence onto Mr. Say's land after vines ran. Moreover, they had not brought him any profit, and the flock was declining. He advertised 20 remaining at 10 pounds each cash and got it. One sick one he let the purchasers have for brada. And brada, or a brotawa, is the exact extra bit over the purchased amount. On Saturday, June 12th of 1773, in the evening, flogged Nanny, Maria, and Cujo for walking through my corn piece, and Chub and Caesar for hiding Cujo. So he was beating them because they walked through his corn piece, and this is how you erode relationships, because if Chub and Caesar were hiding Cujo, but they got beat for doing so, that begins to erode trust in a relationship. On Monday, August the 2nd, 1773, my hogs get lamed and cut almost every day, which is very surprising who does it and where. The lame hog now missing also. So on 2 Saturdays, the 31st of July and the 7th of August, he refused to give his slaves their time off, as they would not confess about the boar, nor who lames the pigs, can keep nothing for them. In his view, July and August had been an almost ruinous period. On Tuesday, August the 17th, 1773, within this last month past, have lost as follows: a young boar gone, never learnt how, worth, say, a pound. A young barrow, his back broken, killed, can't tell how, 10 shillings. Phoebe's child, jaw fallen, 5 pounds. Birthday, July 27th of 1773. Abba's Neptune, near 7 years old, 35 pounds. A fine ewe fit to lamb found dead in a rock hole, 1 pound, 5 shillings. Rachel's, the cow, young calf, say 40 shillings, and a young steer, 8 pounds. Nanny's young child, jaw fallen, 5 pounds, born August 13th, 1773. Total £57 15 shillings. God's will be done. On Sunday, February 13th, 1774, served 15 field Negroes working at Blue Castle Estate 5.5 pounds saltfish each instead of 2 bits apiece. It was very seldom that saltfish was mentioned in Thistlewood's diaries as having been issued to the slaves. The issue had always been herrings, shads, or jumpers. Apparently, there was little advantage for him in the issue. On Sunday, April 3rd, 1774, served my field Negroes 19 bits and 11 bundles of saltfish of 2.25 pounds each, so that my hundredweight of saltfish, which cost 40 bits, just made 41 bits out again, so no profit, only saves silver. On Tuesday, May 24th, 1774, my Negroes now get great quantities of snooks, tarpons, and mudfish, the morasses being full of new water. Plenty of crabs also run o' nights. On Monday, June 13th, 1774, served 13 of my Negroes 2 bits each, gave them a ticket, and ordered them to be at Paul Island early tomorrow morning to work with Mr. Hartnoll's and Mr. Dobson's Negroes. Saturday, July 23rd, 1774, gave my Negroes today. Gave them plenty of cabbage, savoy, and broccoli plants to plant in their grounds. Saturday, August 17th, 1774, my Negroes have scarce done an hour's work in the whole day. In the evening, flogged them. Then we move on to December 17th, 1774. It was Saturday. Made them work as they will never mind their work as they ought, and don't intend giving them any day till they do better. So he didn't want to give them another day off, and he made them work on their customary day off. On Sunday, December 25th, which was Christmas, he says, Christmas Day, served my Negroes 18 herrings each. Likewise, gave Lincoln, Dick, and Abba each a bottle of rum. Cujo and Solon a bottle between them. Caesar and Pompey got a dram. Chubb and Strap got a dram. Fanny, Damsel, and Bess got a dram. Rest of the women, 2 bottles among them. Fibba got 5 bottles. Gave Abba 4 bits for Christmas. Gave my Negroes tickets. And for himself, Cub, Egypt little doll, on the bench in the garden shed. And for her, 2 bits. The general routines have now perhaps been sufficiently indicated. Thistlewood continued his attempts to increase his labor force without much success. On July 15th, 1776, which was a Monday, he attended the Negro sale in the house in Savannah Lamar, where Jimmy Hayes formerly kept the tavern. A very unfair sale, as Mr. Salmon permitted Mr. Gooden, Dr. Walker, Bessie Murray, Fanny Duncan, and others to pick before the sale began, and whole parcels placed ready for particular people. Besides, above 20 of the best left aboard, picked out before they came ashore. The sale not open till past noon and held in a dark room, so he couldn't see anything. The men exposed first and the women afterwards. How could a Negro be examined when 200 people at least in a small room and the door next the sea kept shut? So he was complaining about the fact that he wasn't able to examine the merchandise. On Friday, July 21st, the Birch Tree Provision Ground was allotted, and the account is of interest because it suggests changes of households since October of 1770. The allotments were as follows: Caesar got one, Dick and Myrtilla got two, Maria was the third allotment, Jimmy and Phoebe were the fourth, Nanny was the fifth, Jimmy, who also got an extra bit, was the sixth, Peggy was the seventh, Abba was the eighth, Bess was the ninth, Salon and Damsel were the 10th, Cujo and Fanny were the 11th, Sally was the 12th, Lincoln and Suki were the 13th, Strap and Fanny were the 14th, Pompey was the 15th. So as you can see, this allotment of land was different from that initial allotment, showing that different people were now sharing households and resources together. Next day, Saturday, they had the day to work for themselves. In early August, Thistlewood distributed 8 quarts of peas between them, and in late September, they began to reap. On Monday, August the 12th, 1776, about 10 a.m., went aboard Mr. Watts' ship with Mr. Beckford, Mr. Bosley, and others. Agreed to give £55 and the duty. Mr. Watt could not abate of 59 and duty. So Mr. Beckford, Mr. Bosley, Mr. Hugh White, Mr. James White, Mr. Sterling, Mr. Boyd, and myself, in all, about a dozen came away before the sale was opened. However, others stayed, and he sold a good many. Mrs. Cope wanted an Igbo girl, about 12 years of age, with small feet, if not bow-legged, nor teeth filed, small hands, and long, small, taper fingers for a seamstress, for Miss Peggy. At the end of 1776, Thistlewood had 29 slaves. Around the house were Abba, Damsel, Bess, and Joe. A boy attendant purchased in 1775. In the field gang, there were now 17, including the fishermen. Johnny had died in 1770 and Chubb in 1775, and Cuba had been sold in 1774, but he had relegated Jimmy to the field, and in 1773 he purchased Strap and Fanny. Of children, there were now 8 alive: Abba's Mary, Jenny and Fibba, Maria's Lucy, Phoebe's Tony, Damsel's Nellie and Quashi, and Bess's Bristol. Abba's Johnny and Neptune, and Nanny's Fibba had died. Thistlewood's journals allow us a fairly detailed view of the lives of some of them. We are able to establish at least some of the man-woman relationships. In September of 1767, by distribution of cooking pots to households and other information about individuals, we can identify couples. Abba was matched with Emmetson's Neptune, housed with Sally, and they had Mary, Johnny, and Neptune. Bess was matched with Dick and housed with Dick. They had no children. Damsel was matched with Egypt watchman Harry, and they were not housed together, right? And they had no children. Suki was matched with Lincoln and housed with Lincoln, and they had no children. Maria was matched with Solon and had Solon as a match and was housed with Solon, and they had Lucy. Myrtilla was matched with Egypt driver Johnny, was housed with Frankie, another woman that Thistlewood often had sex with, and they had no children. Phoebe was matched with Egypt Neptune and housed with Jimmy. So this was an interesting relationship right here because Phoebe was matched with Jimmy, but she was housed with Jimmy, excuse me, but she was matched with Neptune from the Egypt plantation. So Thistlewood was trying to get her pregnant by any means necessary, and they had no children. Nanny was matched with Egypt driver Kubina. She was housed alone, and she had one child named Fibba. Kuba wasn't matched with anyone, but was housed with Peggy, and Kuba had a child who was mulatto Sylvia. Sally was matched with Chubb, who we found out earlier was dead, and she was housed with Abba, and they had no children. Excuse me. This last match had been ordained by Thistlewood on Monday, the 7th of July, 1768, and was obviously not successful. Frankie, who lived with Myrtilla, also had a husband in Egypt Louis. With the four other Thistlewood slaves were Pompey, with whom Chubb was housed, Johnny, who lived alone, and Cujo and Caesar, who lived together. When in October of 1770 provision grounds were distributed, there were a few differences. Abba now lived in her house with her three children. Sally was temporarily with the other house slaves, Jimmy, Bess, and Damsel, who slept in the cook room or about the house. Bess having moved elsewhere, Dick now lived with Myrtilla. It is not clear that they were matched, for there is no word of a break with Egypt driver Johnny. But in fact, Dick and Myrtilla remained housemates until 1786, so a match is a reasonable assumption. The new arrangements were as follows. Abba, matched with Ricketts Cujo since December of 70, housed with Mary, Johnny, and Neptune, with no children in the house. Bess wasn't matched with anyone, but she was housed with Jimmy, Damsel, and Sally, with no children in the house. Damsel was matched with Egypt's Harry, Mrs. North's George in 1771, wasn't housed with anyone, and no, she was housed as above with Jimmy, Sally, and Bess, and she had no children. Suki was matched with Lincoln and housed with Lincoln, but they had no children. Maria and Salome were matched with each other, and they lived together, and they had one child named Lucy. Myrtilla was matched with Dick and housed with Dick, but they had no children. Phoebe was matched with Egypt's Neptune, housed with Frankie, but there were no children there. Nanny was matched with Egypt driver Kobina, with lived alone and had a child named Fibba. Cuba was matched with Pompey, possibly, lived with Pompey, and had no children. Sally was single, but she lived with Jimmy, Damsel, and Bess. Of the others, Johnny had recently died. So too had Cuba's Sylvia. Cujo and Chubb were now housed together, and Peggy and Caesar were on their own. Frankie was still matched with Egypt Louis. In July of 1776, According to another distribution of provision grounds, there had been a few more changes. Abba had been matched with Mr. Johnson's Jeremy and housed with Mary, Jenny, and Fibba with no children living in the house, or so to speak. Bess was matched with Mr. Wilson's Jimmy, was housed alone, and had Bristol as a child. Damsel was matched with Salon, housed with Salon, and had Nellie and Quashie as children. Suki was matched with Lincoln and housed with Lincoln, and they had no children, so to speak. Maria was housed with Mr. Wilson's Peter in January of 1776, and they were not housed together because he lived on another plantation, but Maria had a child named Lucy. Myrtilla was matched with Dick and housed with Dick, but they had no children. Phoebe was matched with Jimmy and housed with Jimmy and had a child named Tony. Nanny lived alone, wasn't matched, and had no children. Sally lived alone, wasn't matched, and had no children. Frankie was matched with Strap, lived with Strap, and had no children. Fanny was matched with Cujo, lived with Cujo, and had no children. Cuba had been sold, and Caesar, Pompey, and Peggy lived on their own. Of these 29 slaves, 24 were still on Breadnut Island Pen, where Thistlewood died in December of 1786. 10 others were their children. We can now trace the fortunes of several of them in some detail during the period of 1770 to 1776. A few are well documented. The majority are mentioned from time to time. We can take them in order of their acquisition by Thistlewood. Lincoln was an Ebo purchased from Hertford in 1756. Lincoln would have been about 30 years old in 1770. During these 6 years, he apparently suffered less from illnesses such as chickenpox, fevers, and belly aches, and in 1776, a bloody flux, than from the often severe punishments inflicted by Thistlewood, in spite of which one senses a mutual understanding that might even have touched upon affection. Monday, July 16th, 1770, that morning Lincoln refused to trim some trees, knocked him down with my stick. He is very deceitful, lazy, and impudent. Sent him to weed with the rest. Lincoln was not a large man. After another episode in the following week, Thistlewood described him on Sunday, July 22nd, 1770. Yesterday noon, Vine and Nanny come with a complaint of Lincoln stealing their fowls and other things. When he came out of the morass in the evening, had him seized by Salon and made Jimmy take him to old Jenny's Hill. I went with them and Mr. Say's Nancy. Hannibal affirmed that Lincoln had brought a hen to his house in the night of Saturday the 14th instant, dressed it and eat it, then went and fetched a pullet which he wanted to sell him, told him of Nancy's hog, which he wanted Bacchus to assist him to catch. He also spoke several threatening words, took him back, flogged him, and upon his promising payment, let him go. He is an Ebo, about 5 foot 2 9/10 of an inch high. His teeth are not filed, crab yaws on his hands and feet, so tender-footed. My brand, which is 2 T's inside of an upside down triangle, branded on each cheek and each shoulder, some wheels on his back. I think that means welts on his back. So he was a small man. In February 1771, Lincoln was reported to have stolen a mare belonging to one of the 3 Mile slaves. Wednesday, February 20th, 1771. That afternoon, I rode to Savannah Lamar, had Jimmy with me, and brought home Lincoln out of Mr. Hayward's bilboes and secured him safe in mine. He has not been at work this week at Friendship Estate, but sulking about, and Dick secured him on Monday evening at Friendship Negro houses, suspecting he would run away about the mare. He remained in Thistlewood's bilboes until Sunday the 24th when took off Cuba's collar and put it on Lincoln, gave him a good flogging, and ordered him to his work with the rest. He wore the collar until the following Sunday. Lincoln, as we have already seen, was not a one woman man. In addition to earlier involvements with Egypt Susanna, Egypt Violet, and Egypt Mountain Lucy, who had borne him a daughter named Mary, he was now matched with Suki, mating with Abba, and there was at least one other current attachment. Monday, May 22nd, 1771. Note, Lincoln went out yesterday and did not come home till today noon, and then brought a note from Mr. Hughes begging I would forgive him, he having been at the Prospect Estate to see his wife and overslept himself. Wow. So he was just out there. He was as bad as Thistlewood, but um these women were probably in agreement with having sex with him. But he had Abba, he was mating with Suki, and he had a wife on Prospect Estate. That is impressive. He was out there doing this thing. Tenderfooted means, Moana Hagaziki said, what does tenderfooted mean? It means that your feet are soft and gentle, or they hurt when you walk. So it could have been from the crab yaws because that disease is like scales on the feet and you get cracked, bloody feet. Or it could have been that his feet had not had enough calluses build up on them so that he could walk and withstand the terrain. Bwana Haguziki says he also had effectively sterilized the women through his sexual activity. Yeah. In punishment, he was ordered to bring me 24 crabs this morning on the 7th to pay for the loss of yesterday forenoon, which he promised to do, but never troubled himself to perform. So Thistlewood took away a great coat which Mr. Thompson had given to him and sold it before his face to Egypt Daniel for 2 bits to mortify him. He then ran off to Savannah Lamar brought back by Jimmy and Salon and again secured in the bilboes, and the next day he was flogged. At the end of November, a month in which he had really excelled in duck shooting, he was sent out to search for Cuba, the runaway. On Monday, the 2nd of December, he was still out, although strictly charged to come home Saturday evening. On Tuesday, the 3rd, Thistlewood rode to Macemuir Estate to check on his slaves then at work there. At Retrieve Estate, through which he passed, he was told that Lincoln was at play at the burial of a Negro at the Retrieve all Sunday night. On Monday morning, he had arrived at Egypt saying that he was on his way to the Old Hope, where Cuba was said to be at the seaside, but he was later observed going in the other direction toward Savannah Lamar. Thistlewood sent letters all around soliciting aid in the recapture of both Lincoln and Cuba. So now he had a problem. He didn't just have one runaway slave, he had two. On Wednesday, December the 4th, 1771, about noon, received a letter from Mr. Samuel Say by Lincoln, who also brought home Cuba. She was catched among the Old Hope canes by one of their watchmen and carried to Mr. Say that evening. That evening, I flogged Cuba and put a chain about her neck, wrote to Mr. Peter Richardson and sent her to Macemuir by Lincoln, both to go in the field tomorrow morning, gave each a bit to buy provision with. Lincoln seemed to hold no grudge against old Hannibal. On Monday, May the 5th, 1773, the dogs catched a hog in Birch Tree's ground, and Lincoln and Jimmy brought it home. On Tuesday, May 11th, 1773, flogged Lincoln well for going last night and telling old Hannibal about his hog. And he apparently liked music, but Thistlewood's reaction, presumably to the time and place rather than to the actual performance, was spiteful. Saturday, November 20th, 1773, about 10 o'clock this night, got up and went to my negroes' houses, where I found Mrs. North's George playing up on the banjo to Lincoln. I chopped up all I chopped up in pieces with my cutlass and reprimanded them. So he cut up their banjo. On the night of Friday the 13th, September 11th, unluckily, Lincoln on house watch fell asleep on a table in the cookroom, fell off, and displaced his right kneecap. Thistlewood tried but could not set it back, so he sent for Dr. Allwood, who came in the morning with his associate, Dr. Rock. They fixed it. It stood up edgeways somehow, it seems, in a very uncommon manner. Paid them £2 10 shillings for this visit. In 1776, the seesaw of opinion was very plain, though, as we shall see, it was Lincoln the fisherman as much as Lincoln the man. Wednesday, January 10th of 1776, Lincoln brought most excellent fish today. Thursday, January 25th, 1776, Lincoln scarce bought any fish, put him in the bilboes. Friday, January 26th, 1776, took him out, flogged him, sent him fishing again. Monday, January 29th, 1776, about 11 p.m., Lincoln come home with fish, but did not bring enough for a cat. Ordered Pompey to take hold of him in the cookroom. But while I was getting the bilboes, he escaped from Pompey and ran into the morass, and Pompey after him. But he could not come up with him. Not surprisingly, for Lincoln was apparently small and nimble, and Pompey suffered from incipient elephantitis. Excuse me. Tuesday, January the 30th, 1776, Lincoln brought fish again today, pretty good. Tuesday, May 7th, 1776, about half past noon, Lincoln came, but did not bring a quarter of a bit's worth of fish, which has been his practice a good while past. And when he perceived I would punish him, he threatened to make away with himself if I troubled him. However, gave him a good flogging and put him in the bilboes. He sells all the fish that he ought to bring me, and cannot be kept fishing in my own morasses or the rivers, but will go out to sea and does not come home at all until past dinner time, is extremely impudent. Mm-mm-mm. So he was upset with him. He was upset with him. Thistlewood found 6 bits in Lincoln's purse, which makes some small amends for his loss of time. This suspect for fish he sold Tuesday. Next week, Salon was put to fish and Lincoln was sent to dig in the garden. Johnny, brought from Mr. John Parkinson in 1758. Thistlewood did not estimate his age. A field worker, he was almost constantly ill of stomach troubles in 1770, and on Sunday, July 22nd, he died. Salon and Cujo dug his grave, and he was buried on the pin near where Cuba's child was buried, Sylvia, who was born the November 12th, 1766, and died March 16th, 1768. Simon, also brought from Parkinson in February 1758, had been sold to Jeremiah Myler in April of 1761. Abba, the third listed of the three bought from Parkinson, she was one of those who survived Thistlewood on the pen. The main notices of her in this period, January to November, deal with her health. In April and May, she was sadly plagued with boils and was being given mercury for her negligencies. On Sunday, June the 3rd, 1770, gave Abba a ticket for herself and Salon, who carries her barrel, pig, to sell, worth 5 cobs. They killed him in the path and scarce made 3 off of him. She is very wrong-headed and obstinate. Wednesday, July 11th, 1770, warned Abba and Daniel this morning with a matinee strap for laziness and cleaning the house. And a matinee strap are strips made of manatee strap are strips made of manatee hide. This was thought to be too cruel and therefore prohibited by the customs of the country, according to Cassidy and Page writing in 1980. So it was a strap made out of manatee hide. On Thursday, September the 13th, 1770, in the morning, flogged Abba and Damsel for neglect in cleaning the house. Give me 1 second. On Sunday, September the 23rd, 1770, for corn and plantains, 12 bits, corn 3, and plantains 4 bit per hundred today. But Abba is a very negligent market woman. In December, Abba made a match with John Ricketts Cujo. They did it slyly, said Thistlewood, but on the 30th, he wrote, Abba's new sweetheart Cujo at the pen today and asked me to have her, which I consented, and asked me to leave to what? Abba's new sweetheart Cujo at the pen today and asked me leave permission to have her, which I consented to. This in no way affected Thistlewood's proprietorship. Between the 26th of November and the 31st of December, he took her, Abba, 4 times, but twice he said it wasn't any good because she was on her period. In 1771, Abba's Johnny died. His ailments began on Saturday, January the 5th. This morning, Abba's Johnny fainted or had a fit. His mother, almost out of her senses, Vine bled him, and he came to himself, but complains of pain in his stomach and much not well. On Tuesday, January the 8th, this morning sent Abba to Savannah Lamar with Johnny to the doctor, made Bess go with her, and I rode down to the bay also and went to Dr. Panton's, but he's not at home. Got a phial of mixture from his assistant to give him, for which I paid 4 bits, but he died before they got home at about 10 o'clock. His disease was a spasm or locking of the jaws. Abba quite frantic and will hear no reason. For rum a bit, gave Abba rum to entertain her company at the burial. Made Lincoln dig a grave for Abba's Johnny near her house. At night they buried him. I gave some boards, nails, and other tools so that they could make him a coffin, which Mrs. Bennet, Sam, and Cumberland performed. Venus, Johnny, Shelley, Say, Mr. Say's Vine, several of Egypt and Kirkpatrick's Negroes were at the burial, and they sang songs. Johnny would have been about 6.5 years old. Within the next week, 3 weeks, both Abba and her Cujo gave Thistlewood presents. Cujo brought him oranges, and Abba gave him a fine roasting pig, which he had roasted for dinner, and sent his horse for Mr. Hayward to come and eat with him. Cujo did not apparently hold Abba for long. Note, it is suspected that Abba keeps Jimmy, for he is asleep and stupid all day, and the Negroes remark the reason. Friday, May 3rd, 1771. A little before day this morning, a crab making a huge noise in the piazza, called Jimmy, but he was not in the cook room. Therefore, got up and took Pompey with me to Abba's house and catched Jimmy sleeping with her. Excuse me. And caught Jimmy sleeping with her. He endeavored to escape, but I laid hold of him, put them both in the bilboes, and then light flogged them. One of the children was upon the bed with them, full of yaws, although Jimmy has never had them, and the cook room left to itself, although all the utensils was in it, and all the clothes in this week's wash. Mm, mm, mm. Greetings, forecast. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so glad you're here. The infantilization, commerce, and labor of 1776. Infertilization, don't mind this matron, it just points. Oh, okay. So yeah, forecast. Thanks so much for tuning in. You guys have to excuse me. I am dealing with this Michigan weather. So I have a cough and a stuffy nose, and I am making my way through this. So bear with me. Give me 1 second. Let me get my tea. All right. Sorry about that. So But this was not a match Jimmy, as we shall see, was playing the field. Although Abba was for a time his favorite, as she was Thistlewood's. So Jimmy was actually s- rubbing it in Thistlewood's face that he could have a woman that he had because Jimmy was having sex with Abba to spite Thistlewood. In the course of the year, Thistlewood took her 39 times, and in these 7 years, 155 times, often in his house, but sometimes in the field and on the well worn garden bench. On nearly every occasion, as with the other women, he paid her two bits. On at least one occasion, he seemed to display a jealousy of her association with Jimmy. On the night of Saturday, May 17th, 1771, Cuba, who had run away, was brought home. Getting out of bed to put her in the bilboes, he writes, Jimmy not to be found, said to be gone fishing. I went and searched Abba's house for him. Come, illa sup lecta, in the bed. Also searched the other Negro houses, but did not find him. On Sunday, July 7th, Abba was given leave to throw water, as they called it, for her boy Johnny, who died some months ago. And although I gave them strict charge to make no noise, they transgressed and beat the kumbi loud, singing high. Many Negroes there from all over the country. On September, on October the 17th, 1771, Abba was brought to bed of a girl, very yellow it seems, but the baby died a week later, jaw fallen, and it was buried. On November 11th, Abba returned to work. Most references in her diaries deal with his sexual relations with her, with occasional illnesses, pregnancies, the death of Neptune, and indications of special attention by Thistlewood, partly perhaps because she was chief domestic slave, partly perhaps because she was his most prolific childbearing female, and perhaps also because he liked her. Thursday, the 13th of February, 1772, a stray hog in Rockhole Provision Ground this morning made Jimmy catch it with the dogs, cut its throat, and gave it to Abba. On Sunday, April the 17th, 1772, Egypt Louis, here all day, hangs after Abba, Bess, and Damsel. Excuse me, let me drink my tea. On Friday, July the 3rd, 1772, Abba has a little of the fever, occasioned by a waxing colonel, it seems, gave her a wine glass of tinctura sacra. Saturday, August the 22nd, 1772, gave Abba leave to keep her sow. Then, on the 23rd, that morning, he has sex with Abba. On the 25th, Abba brought to bed of a girl between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. What does that mean? Brought to bed of a girl between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. Abba gave a cob on Sunday, August 30th. Abba gave a cob as I have nothing to assist her with now. She lays in. On the 21st of September, she came out. The baby girl was Jenny. No mention was then made of paternity, but later word indicated that the father was neither Jimmy nor Thistlewood, but Lincoln. From time to time, Abba's remaining son Neptune had been unwell, but there had been no suggestion of a dangerous complaint until August the 2nd, 1773. 2 days later, about four this morning, Abba's Neptune died, complained of pains all over him, a most violent cold. I suppose, by the water running through her house, recent heavy rains, and making the floor wet. Had a fern coffin made for him by Mr. Say's Kwaku. Also had a grave dug, and at night they buried him. This is a great loss. On the 4th of May in the next year, Abba was ill of violent pain in her belly. Miscarried, it seems. On Wednesday, June 15th, 1774, for rice, 2 bits for Abba's Jenny, who is sick. On Saturday, February the 4th, 1775, as Abba's soul eats up all my young lambs in endeavoring to catch her today, she somehow hurt her, so that at night she died. As this sow was the support of herself and her children, gave her 32 bits to lessen her loss. So I thought that enslavers were supposed to pay for all of this stuff in regards to their enslaved population. What does he mean that this sow was the support of herself and her children? On Tuesday, May the 2nd, 1775, gave Abba 10 bits against her laying in. On Saturday, May 20th, 1775, gave Abba 2 bits for her honesty in bringing me some bits I had lost out of my pocket. On Sunday, May 28th, 1775, come in Abba that evening on the bench under the shed outside, gave her a dram of rum, 2 bits, also gave her 8 red herrings equaling 20 bits besides what she eats. On Friday, June 9th, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Abba brought to bed of a boy. This child, this means that she had a baby at home. This having to brought to bed of a child has got to mean that she's having children. He says this child also died about a week later, jaw fallen, had it buried. On Friday, January the 26th, 1776, a Mason Negro here named Jeremy, who has or is about making a match with Abba. He belongs to Mr. Johnson. It is said Abba is with child already, suspected for Lincoln or Jimmy, and perhaps for Thistlewood. In March, both Abba and her daughter Mary, and in April, little Jenny had chickenpox. On Friday, April the 19th, 1776, Abba was ill, close to labor, and on the night of the 21st, she was brought to bed of a girl. This was Fibba, whose parentage was acknowledged by Lincoln. So Alba had a very interesting sex life, didn't she? Nanny, purchased by Mr. Cope for Thistlewood in July of 1761 in Kingston. Nanny was a new Negro, would have been about 30 years old in 1770, brought at the same time, and therefore probably her shipmates were Solon and Caesar. She was a field worker, and, as with other mothers, her child went with her wherever she was hired out. Friday, March 30th, 1770, my nanny brought home from Friendship little Fibba ill. Nanny returned immediately. The child described sadly. Fibba would then have been nearly 5 years old. On this occasion, she recovered. In the first week of June, Thistlewood bought two young hogs from Nanny for 10 bits each. They were small. Of the first, the two sides just weighed 12 pounds, but it is but meager. On Saturday, June the 30th, 1770, this evening Nanny stole one of my squab ducks. Caesar saw her catch it, found it upon her in her room. She held it so fast under her coats that she killed it. I flogged her for it. In June of 1770, little Fibble was again ill of a sore backside. Gave it physic, gave it physic. Nanny was at home minding it, and Nanny herself suffered in 1771 from crab yaws and from a cut on her left hand accidentally received while working at Friendship. This kept her away for a few days so that she could be sent to Dr. Panton. Wednesday, January 16th, 1771, received some sarati and purge for her. Sarati is a thick ointment made of wax and oil and other ingredients. On Thursday, January 17th, 1771, laid a poultice to Nanny's hand last night. This morning took it off and laid on dry lint and made her sweat over the steam of boiling water all day. Gave her a dose of physic. In April, she had crab yaws again, badly on her hands. Thistlewood had them dressed with black dog this time, which was probably jalap, a purgative made from the roots of the vine of binewood. So he was trying to get the yaws out of her and then put her in the bilboes, presumably to ensure that she did not use them. In September of 1771, after a long illness, little Fibba died. In mid-July, Nanny and Thistlewood had taken her to Dr. Panton. He says her bloating is owing to the yaws striking in, and that I ought to have given her brimstone when first perceived. He now gave me equal quantities of flour, of brimstone, and of Venice treacle, to be given her as much as will lie upon the small end of a teaspoon, 3 times a day, with a little sugar and water. Nanny stayed home to mind her daughter, and doses of jalap, which was black sage, followed. Thistlewood supplied rice and chicken broth. On the 22nd of July, she was still ill and Nanny was tending her. At the beginning of August, she was given a small mercurial pill, as she is troubled with worms. On Thursday, the 8th of August, 1771, this morning I gave one to Fibba, 2 spoonfuls of warm water as she voided some lately by the mouth. And at about 2 p.m., Nanny brought her to me with her belly swelled monstrously, wrote a note to Dr. Panton, and sent her immediately by Nanny. They did not return this night. They had waited all night without seeing Dr. Panton, and little Fibber was rather worse, if anything. Thistlewood had her bathed in warm water and oil, and on Saturday the 10th, he and Nanny took her back to Dr. Panton, who examined and again prescribed, but to no avail. Little Fibber died about 8 p.m. on Monday, the 9th of September. The next day, she was buried in a grave by Lincoln and Dick. There was not much more about Nanny beyond the routine of labor. She was flogged once for showing an unwillingness to carry a length of board from Savannah Lamar to the pen. In mid 1772, she had ringworms on the side of her neck. In May of 1773, she was lame of a breaking out on her legs. On July 28th, she bore a girl who died on August 17th, jaw fallen. He had it buried. On Sunday, the 21st of November in 1773, Thistlewood notes that he had sex with her while she was on her period, standing up backwards. This was the fifth and last occasion in these 7 years. Nanny remained generally unhealthy through 1774, but she was back in the field. In August of 1776, she was again flogged for refusing to let Peggy go with her yesterday to look provisions. In late November, she was laid up of looseness, but she recovered. Salon must have been about 25 years old in 1770. For a time, he appears to have taken Lincoln's place as driver until he was himself succeeded by Dick. He was frequently sent out in search of runaways. On Thursday, the 6th of December, 1770, in the evening, Salon come home, but no news of Cuba. Suspects he misspends his time, had him flogged, then gave him a fresh ticket and sent him out again. So tickets had like time limits on them usually. Mm. Like all the others, he suffered from yaws which broke out from time to time, and there were other occasional ailments, but he appears to have been comparatively healthy. Late in 1773, he was one of the watchmen and was twice flogged for negligence or absenteeism. On Monday, December 20th, his house was destroyed by a fire which began in Maria's room owing to her own carelessness. Note, although my Negroes were all at work, close, yet no one saw it till I discovered it. At the time, Salon and Maria were having domestic troubles. On Sunday, the 14th of November, 1773, Thistlewood flogged Maria for cuckolding Salon at Retrieve and stirring up quarrels. The Retrieve stableman Quashie called in the evening on his way home from Ackendown, preached a sermon. In August of 1774, he had the misfortune to be appointed as Thistlewood's fisherman. On Thursday, September the 6th, 1774, at night, flogged Salon for neglect in bringing fish. On December 31st, which was a Saturday in 1774, at night, flogged Salon and reprimanded John, who was Mulatto John, who was at home for Christmas holidays, for leaving my canoe in Mr. White's trench so that Taylor, the pilot's Negroes, took her to Savannah Lamar under the pretense of their lines being stolen. However, John and him fetched her back from the bay. Again, on April the 23rd, the 11th of May, and the 13th of June in 1775, Solon was flogged for bringing no fish or poor quality fish. On June 16th, no fish brought, no sign of Solon. Understandably enough, he had run away. The next morning he returned with a beg-off note from Mr. Hayward, but it did not help. He was flogged, a collar and chain put about his neck, and he was sent out to fish. He brought mudfish a day, but a month later he was flogged again. Then, to compound misfortune, he lost Thistlewood's canoe. On Thursday, July 20th, 1775, Solon came and told me my canoe had gone from her place. The scoundrel had lost her. He was out all day and could not find her. Solon was given a ticket to go out in search, but not finding her, he stayed out. Sunday the 23rd, Dick brought him back from Savannah Lamar. Solon was, perhaps to his great relief, sent off to retrieve to work, and Chubb, perhaps to his dismay, was put back as fisherman, but only for 2 days, for on the 35th Lincoln was appointed to the job. Several searches failed to recover the canoe. Thursday, the 28th of September, 1775, flogged Solon about the canoe again, as he would not tell me how she was just lost, but first one lie, then another. Solon, as we have seen, suffered as a fisherman, and in June of 1776, Solon was back to the task and the whippings. On the 20th of June, 2nd of September, 4th of September, and again on the 5th, he was flogged, and not for the first time, collared. Brought bad fish, flogged him again and put a collar about his neck. Note, he started from Lincoln, Jimmy, Strap, Caesar, and Pompey when going to be put down, but they catched him again in the morass. More complaints followed, and on the 9th, Solon disappeared. Lincoln brought him back on the 10th, put in bilboes. He remained until the 14th. When taken out, he ran off again. Dick, Strap, and Lincoln were sent in search. On Wednesday, October the 10th of 1776, this morning, Solon was brought home by Egypt's Kamina, who catched him last night. He attempted to stab Kamina and did wound his arm a little. Gave Long Kamina $1 for his trouble, flogged Solon, put a chain on the collar about his neck, brand marked him in the face, and sent him in the field. Caesar would have been about 23 years old in 1770, there was comparatively little special mention of him. Wednesday, September 26th, 1770, Caesar catch stealing corn last night out of the lime kiln provision by Solon, flogged Caesar well, and put Solon to watch drams pieces. In each year, Caesar suffered some ailment, and there were occasions when Thistlewood thought he was pretending. Sunday, October the 17th, 1773, Caesar worked last Monday forenoon and laid up all the rest of the week in the retrieved Negro houses, threatened Dick about it well, and made him fetch him home, then had Caesar flogged. He has no fever at present, but perhaps may not be well. The next day he was given Ward's red pill. Towards the end of 1776, he was sick, at home with the clap. Cuba was one of 6 slaves brought from Mr. Hutt at Savannah Lamar in December of 1761. She was an Igbo and would have been about 24 years old in 1770. Her child, Sylvia, born in November of 1766, had died in March of 1768. She was, in the terms of the time, an incorrigible runaway. Between January 1st, 1770, and May 18th, 1774, when Thistlewood sold her, she ran away 14 times. During the first 5 months of 1770, there was little beyond routine mention of her. Then, Saturday, June 30th of 1770, Thistlewood writes, Kuba wanting, sent Salon to look for her, but he found nothing of her. Sunday, July 1st, 1770, heard of my Kubas robbing a Negro wench of Mr. Bosley's of rice and young pigeons about a fortnight ago in the road under pretense of her carrying her load for her, marched away with it. On July 2nd, she was sent home from Paradise where she had been found. Thistlewood put her in the bilboes and the next day took her out, collared and chained her, and sent her to clean the pasture. Friday, July 6th of 1770, Cuba wanting, but about 4 o'clock, Jimmy and Damsel coming home with water from Barclay's River, met her going that way and brought her back, flogged her well, and Bram marked her in the forehead. She has broke open Mr. Say's Nancy's house since noon, stolen rice, beads, calabashes, and other things. I was forced to pay Nancy a bit for her rice. On Wednesday, the 11th, she was off again, but caught the same evening by Salon in the Egypt cane fields. Thistlewood sent her back into the field to work, but locked her in the bilboes at noon and at night. Monday, July 23rd, 1770, at the intercession of Egypt Lucy by my desire, did not put Cuba in the bilboes at night, but ventured her again. On Thursday, July 26th of 1770, found Cuba had her collar loose, so took it off for good once more. But he collared and chained her again after another day's absence in early August. 3 days later, on the 6th, she was off again. On Tuesday, August the 7th, 1770, Lincoln outlooking Cuba yet. Note, she was in Gooden's Pen's bilboes yesterday, but pretending to faint as one of Mr. Gooden's Negroes was bringing her home. He left her and she went away. On the 9th, Lincoln brought her home. On Friday, August the 10th, 1770, flogged Cuba and sent her in the field, but she presently fainted and dropped down, and they brought her home. But believe she shams it. She says Lincoln beat her on her breast in the field, but all the rest of the Negroes say not. That afternoon sent her out again by way of trial. On Monday, August the 13th, gave Cuba a mercurial pill last night, as she has the venereal disease, it seems very bad, and moved her into the cook room to prevent her getting cold, where secured in her bilbos and take her out into the field in the days, gave her another pill at night. Where did she get the venereal disease from? Because there's not a lot of mention of him having sexually assaulted her. Or maybe the author is protecting Thistlewood from that reality. We'll have to keep in mind these dates, right? August of 1770, to see what other clues the author leaves for us. Saturday, September the 29th, 1770. Last night, the garden gate being locked, Cuba climbed over it and grubbed up the potatoes. Flogged her this morning for it. Thursday, October the 4th, 1770. A punch strainer hanging up against the buttery. Cuba sleeping in the cook room last night. Took the strainer and shit in it, wrapping it up and covering it with a piece of board. This breakfast time, it had rubbed all over her face and mouth, but she minds it not. So Cuba wasn't no joke. She wanted to be free, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get herself free, including making herself look insane. Thursday, November 1st, 1770. As my Cuba has took a great many mercury pills, gave her a ward red pill today, which worked her well. On Tuesday, the 27th, Cuba ran off again. Salon was sent in search. On Saturday, the 8th of December, 1770, last night, Salon brought home Cuba. He catched her near the cave going to Bluefields, where she says she has a shipmate, secured her feet in the bilboes in the stable, allowed no fire. On Saturday, December the 9th, 1770, set a chain to Cuba's collar and delivered a padlock and key to Salon to fasten her every dinner time and night, and sent her to work with the rest. At this time, the field gang were working at Friendship with Salon as driver. On Christmas Eve, Cuba got away again, but was caught the same day. Assistance in catching her cost Thistlewood 5 bits, which he duly noted. For the next 3 or 4 months, except for a day's absence, following which she was again chained and collared, Cuba stayed put. Then, on April the 23rd, 1771, she ran away again. 5 days later, Salon brought her home from Roaring River Estate, where she had broke open a house. This time, Thistlewood sent her to Mr. Hayward to have a collar and a pothook put on her. On the 13th of May, she went out again. Once more, Salon was given a ticket and sent in pursuit. On the 18th at night, he brought her back from Blue Castle Estate. She was apparently still wearing her collar, chain, and pothook. For on the 29th, the collar and chain were taken off, but the pothook left on. During the next few weeks of quiet, that too must have been removed. On the Friday, November the 1st, 1771, last night, Cuba detected by Bess stealing her corn, but neglecting to secure her, this morning she is wanting. Sunday, November the 3rd, 1771, one of Kirkpatrick's Negro men brought home Cuba this morning, made Bess give him 4 bits as she neglected securing her, and flogged Cuba very well. On the 25th of November, Cuba ran off again. She was caught in Old Hope Estate canes and brought home by Lincoln. She was flogged and sent with Lincoln to field work at Macemere Estate. Tuesday, December the 10th, 1771. This evening, my Cujo come from Macemere to let me know that Cuba got out of the hothouse last night and has run away again. Dick brought her home on the 14th. Back in the field, she was accidentally cut on the arm with a hoe and consequently sent home. By this time, Thistlewood had determined to get rid of her. Tuesday, December 24th, 1771, that afternoon, wrote to Mr. Hayward to buy Jimmy and sent down Cuba for Mr. Gilbraith to see, but he did not like her. Sunday, December 29th, 1771, for plantains for my Cuba, 2 bits, and that became a regular weekly allowance. Friday, January the 10th, 1772, gave Cuba a Ward's red pill this morning. She has took many mercury pills lately till her mouth begun to be sore. Wednesday, January the 15th, 1772, flogged Cuba for stealing potatoes out of Rockhole Provision Ground. Toward the end of March, when the field slaves were sent to labor further afield than usual at Mount Pleasant Estate in the parish of Hanover, Thistlewood did not send Cuba. She is so troublesome in running away. She was kept home weeding the gardens. On Saturday, March 28th, 1772, that afternoon, wrote to Mr. Hayward by way of Jimmy and Cuba, but Cuba was not liked. So, come back. I would have let her gone at 30 pounds. In August, she was at work with the others at Retrieve Estate, but she had been continually unwell, and on the 4th, that afternoon, sent Jimmy on Mackie horse to the Retrieve to bring home Cuba, which he did. She is very bad of the clap, or rather pox. So which one was it, or was it a combination? Had he given her some superbug? During Monday, November the 8th, 1773, Cuba still at home, ill of a dropsy and venereal running, and I think is rather worse, if anything. Since August of the previous year, Cuba had been frequently ill, and now, on the 10th of November, she was sent to Dr. Drummond's to remain there for treatment. She seems to have stayed there until early April 1774, when she was again among the field gang being sent out to work. On the 18th of April, she ran away. Thistlewood sent word all around that she was missing. Solon went in search. He couldn't find her. On May 8th, Thistlewood heard that she had been to Mr. Chambers in the Savannah, to get him to beg for her. Mr. Chambers had given her a note, but she had not brought it home. Chubb and Strap were sent after her, again with no success. On Monday, the 16th of May, she was brought home by Paradise Jack, who caught her on that estate. He was rewarded with 6 bits and a drink. There is no mention of punishment for Cuba, but on the 18th of May, Thistlewood took her to Kirkpatrick Pen, where I sold Cuba to Mr. George Leslie for 40 pounds. I made Dick take her down to Savannah Lamar, where went myself and delivered her to the captain of Mr. Leslie's vessel going for Georgia, Mr. Bean, the wharfinger, present. So he sent her north, right? Because she kept running away down south, but he sent her north to Georgia. So never forget about the intra-American slave trade between the Caribbean and the colonies. On Saturday, the 21st of May, 1774, the vessel sailed for Savannah, Georgia. Cuba was on her. So too was Mr. William Palmels on a visit to Georgia, whom we meet later on. Suki, who was Lincoln's wife, had been one of the six brought from John Hutt in December of 1761. Thistlewood estimated then that her age at 14, and he paid £50 for her. Hers was a comparatively quiet record in these 7 years. She reportedly bore no children, suffered no illness more serious than a bad belly ache in March of 1775 and chickenpox in April of 1776. She never ran away and was flogged only once in April of 1771 for lending out her hoe and so losing time on job work. The most frequent mentions of her relate to sexual activity with Thistlewood, which was 26 times at 2 bits. Maria, also a field worker and one of six brought from John Hutt, would have been about 23 years old at the beginning of 1770. In November of 1766, she had borne a daughter named Lucy. Her husband was Solon, the driver, whom she deserted for a lover at the Retrieve, followed by Mr. Wilson's Peter, mentioned as her husband in January of 1776, and Egypt's Kubina in September 1776. Thistlewood took her only 13 times in 7 years, and whether it was because she was less demanding or he less impressed, her usual recompense was only 1 bit. He usually gave out 2, remember that. At the beginning of February 1770, she was big-bellied and said likely to miscarry. Nonetheless, Thistlewood took her on the 20th. Again in early May, she was reported likely to miscarry, and Vine came over and bled her in the foot. On June 11th, she was laid up complaining of her belly, but she was at work in the garden that week. Tuesday, June 26th of 1770, come Maria in Solon's house. On the 9th of July, she was at the Negro house, big-bellied again. In that month, Thistlewood took her twice. On Monday, the 6th of August, she was delivered of a boy. On the 13th, the child died, jaw fallen, had it buried. On the February the 20th, 1771, Maria was once more said to be breathing. It was an early assessment, for it was not until the 23rd of September that she produced a daughter. Phoebe was put to attend to her after the departure of Kirkpatrick's old fibber. Sunday, the 29th of September, 4 plantains, 2 bits to assist Maria and Solon. This child was Rachel. In July of 1772, Maria's older daughter Lucy was ill of a fever, and Thistlewood dosed her with 20 grains of jalap and give Lucy a natto every morning. Lucy recovered. Late in 1773, Maria's match with Solon began to break up as she flirted with the newfound love on Retrieve Estate. On Monday, December 17th, 1774, in the morning, flogged Maria for leaving Solon and running to her sweetheart at the Retrieve. On Thursday, January 26, 1775, Maria's Rachel is troubled with falling down of the anus owing to weakness, I imagine occasioned by the yaws. On Sunday, March 5th, 1775, flogged Maria for quarrelsomeness at Glen Lay. In August, little Rachel was still bad with yaws, and Maria had for some time been laid up lame with a bad sore on her leg. On Sunday, August the 27th, 1775, Rachel, Salon and Maria's child, died, occasioned by the yaws, having had them exceedingly bad a long time, also troubled with prolapsus ani. In 1771, Maria matched first with one of Mr. Wilson's slaves and then with Egypt Kubina, who had previously been Nancy's husband. He uses the terms husband and wife very loosely because these were enslaved people. They did not have spouses, they had mates and they had sexual partners and they had the agency, I guess, from time to time to decide who their sexual partners were. But oftentimes, Thistlewood took these women whenever he wanted to, and he forced these women to mate with whoever he wanted them to. So let's not let's not use these terms husband and wife so loosely. In November of the same year, little Lucy, asleep in the cookroom, tumbled from the table and broke a bone in her thigh. No Friday, November the 8th, 1776, Dr. Samuel Bell came and rolled up Lucy's thigh. The bone was broken short, but it is in a place, but in its place before he came. This was lucky for her because the accident occurred on the 5th, 3 days before the doctor arrived. Pompey, who was a Coromante, also brought from Mr. John Hutt, would have been about 25 years old in 1770. He began 1770 in the hazardous job of fisherman. Thursday, February 8th, 1770, flogged Pompey well for roguery and laziness. He bought 27 shrimps for 24 hours of work. 4 days later, Thistlewood sent him and turned him in the field. Chubb was made fisherman. But Pompey had a bad leg and was never to be a strong field worker. In June, he was taken out of the field gang and put as a goat herder. Thursday, June 7th, 1770, flogged Pompey for letting the goats stray all about. On Tuesday, June 12th, 1770, Pompey after the goats. Note, he was robbed of his provisions last night in the thatch walk. He fought stoutly and has a cut in his face. Saturday, August the 4th, 1770. This morning, Plato brought Pompey home, catched last night stealing corn and breaking cane at Egypt. Gave Plato a bit and a dram and a piece of tobacco. Between mid-February 1771 and the end of June 1772, Pompey was flogged 8 times for negligence in minding the goats and horses. On some occasions, Thistlewood noted dissatisfaction without punishment, as on September the 8th, Sunday, 1771. Died an ewe goat and her wether kid through Pompey's neglect and feeding them on wet ground. His bad leg apart, Pompey appears to have kept comparatively healthy, but in July of 1772, he had a fever and Vine bled him and Thistlewood gave him Ward's red pill. Chubb was temporarily appointed to goat herd In August, Pompey was dosed with a mercurial pill. In September, on the 15th, Pompey and Mackie horse missing this morning. It seems he said he was going into the country to sell fish and look for victuals last night. Cuba was put to tend the goats, and Jimmy was given a ticket and sent to the Gaul to see if Pompey had been apprehended. He had. He and Mackie horse were brought home, and he was flogged and once again put into the field gang. Thereafter, the main entries concerning him are treatment of for Burbo, which had to be lanced, and his swollen leg. Monday, July 10th, 1775, Pompey home at home from retrieve of his big leg now greatly swelled. In 1776, Dr. Drummond was of the view that nothing can be done for Pompey. Thereafter, he was usually kept on the pen from whence he made occasional raids on the Egypt canes, and toward the end of that year we leave him flogged for having stolen a chicken from a watchman on Egypt. Will, also purchased from Mr. Hutt, had died before Thistlewood's moved from Egypt to Breadnut Pen Island Pen. Dick. The sixth listed of Thistlewood's purchases from John Hutt was said to be an Igbo, about 26 years old in December of 1761, when he was acquired. For some time, he and Bess were matched, but by 1776, he was with Myrtilla, with whom he remained. Dick was a field hand, sometimes acting as driver, and sometimes put to help one or other of the skilled slaves whom Thistlewood from time to time employed or hired. In the mid 1770s, he was for nearly 2 months ill of stomach troubles, for which he was only slowly recovered in August. Then, in 1775, he was down with yaws, but there is little else of particular interest recorded about him. Sally, a Congo that had been purchased from Mr. Jeremiah Myler in 1762. In 1770, she would have only been 17 or 18 years old. Thistlewood's matching of her with Chubb was not successful, and for the most part, she either lived alone or with the house slaves. Monday, the 2nd of July, 1770, he notes, last night, when Jimmy and others fast asleep in the cookroom, Sally took a young fowl out of a basket, where covered up by the cookroom side of the outside, boiled and eat it, carried the feathers and threw behind where Nanny lives, then came and waked Jimmy, telling him somebody had come and stood a long time looking upon her, then took out the chicken and went away, and that she endeavored to wake Jimmy but could not. However, some of the feathers were found in the pot in which she boiled it this morning, and she soon confessed, flogged her. So she came up with a very elaborate story, but I wonder what was her beef with Nanny, right? That she was trying to blame it on Nanny. Or was she trying to blame it on some strange, mysterious person of the night and just happened to throw the feathers out at Nanny's house? She was then sent back to her job tending the corn in the provision ground. On Tuesday, July 3rd, 1770, he had sex with Sally outside. On Tuesday, August the 7th of 1770, as Sally steals everything left in the cookroom and eats if eatable, Fibba had her tied with her hands behind her naked for the mosquitoes to bite her tonight. She bawled out lustily, but before 9 o'clock in the evening, broke loose and ran away. I got up and all the hands went to seek her. I caught her near the rock holes in Ditto Provision Ground. Her hands were tied up so tight that the string hurt her very much. I brought her home and secured her for this night in the bilboes. About 9 in the evening, I had sex with Sally outside in the Rockdale Provision Ground on August 9th. On Saturday, August the 18th, 1770, this evening, Sally, being sent on an errand to Egypt, made away with a new handkerchief driver Johnny gave her to bring to Fibba. On Tuesday, October the 2nd, 1770, I had sex with Sally. It wasn't that great. Mm-hmm. In 1771, Sally ran away 3 times from the 9th, from the 7th to the 9th of February, when Salon brought her home from John Ricketts Mountain. She was put in the bilboes and next morning flogged and chained about her neck. The chain was not removed until Sunday, March the 3rd. But a week later, collar and chain were put back on as she lost me an afternoon this last week. Being absent from job work, she remained collared and chained until the 24th. On the 20th of May, she ran away again. This time she returned of her own accord on the 22nd. The next day, she was whipped, kept at home, and sent to weed in the garden with Lincoln and Martilla. On Saturday, the 2nd of November, 1771, Thistlewood again recorded sexual intercourse with her. She apparently ran away immediately after. She didn't want him, and Lincoln was sent after her. She was not, however, brought in until the 6th, when Pompey found her, and it would appear that Lincoln had let her go after hearing that Thistlewood had taken her. So there was more tension between Thistlewood and Lincoln. Was he jealous of Lincoln? Was Lincoln some night prowler that went behind Thistlewood and had sex with his women, blowing their backs out, making Thistlewood jealous? On Thursday, the 7th of November, 1771, flogged Lincoln for not bringing Sally Saturday evening, and Sally for running away, and news carrying. Fibba highly displeased. What was Fibba upset about? Was Fibba upset because Sally was becoming his new favorite plaything? Who knows? Nonetheless, he took her twice again in early 1772. In August 1772, Sally was badly taken with yaws from which she had previously suffered, but this time it led to the amputation of a joint of one of her toes. Late 1772 and early 1773, she was generally lame, and Thistlewoods sometimes provided her with foodstuffs. She did not go back to the field gang work until Monday, May 10th, 1773, when she was sent to Blue Castle Estate. In December, Thistlewood resumed his sexual attentions. On the 4th and again on the 23rd, when once again he said sed non bene, which it wasn't very good. And as he would put it on Tuesday, June the 6th, 1774, ditto. So if he continually was having sex with this woman and it wasn't good or gratifying, and he was giving her half as much money for the privilege of him screwing her, why did he continue to have sex with her? I think that Thistlewood was trying to breed his way into a larger enslaved population through natural increase, but he had this venereal disease that prohibited the women from getting pregnant and that he kept spreading amongst them. In September of 1774, Sally once again ran away. Mulatto John, his son, was sent after her and found her at Long Pond Gate and brought her back, and I had her flogged. Sunday, November 20th, 1774. Sally has the clap very badly. I wonder where she got it from. In June of 1775, the sequence was repeated. Another occasion of bad sex, another occasion of her running away. Returned of her own accord this time and again flogged. But now Chubb, who had been sent after her, had failed to come home. In April of 1776, Sally came home from Blue Castle Lane. A few days later, Thistlewood took her again, and afterwards he told her to go back to Blue Castle. She set off, but not for Blue Castle. On Wednesday, April the 1st, she was brought home by Salon, who found her in the savannah. Mr. Gooden's penkeeper had harbored her. She was put in the bilboes, flogged the next day, collared, and sent to work with Jimmy and Pompey carrying pond earth into the garden. That evening, she was sent back to Blue Castle. On Saturday, the 22nd of June, 1776, took the lock collar from off Salon, unsuccessful fisherman, and put it upon Sally, as she will not help herself but attempts to run away. She only attempts to run away because you keep sexually assaulting her, right? Greetings, Culture Education. Thank you so much for tuning in. Greetings, Sister Raw and the elders listening with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight's going to be a long reading. We're almost done. We have another 15 pages or so to go. But remember, Sally was only running away, right? Because she didn't want to have sex with Thistlewood. And every time he forced her to have sex with him, she ran away. In July, she went twice. On Monday, the 8th day for the day, and again on the 15th when Jimmy found her at Spring Garden Estate. The punishments followed because he would flog her when she would be found. On Saturday, the 3rd of August, Thistlewood led her to the bench in the garden shed and took her again. So he couldn't keep his hands off of her. She was already sick with a venereal disease, and he was sick with a venereal disease. So this was prime breeding ground for some super venereal disease. On October 28th, she ran off again and was brought home by Egypt Kamina 2 days later. He got a bit and a drink. She got the chain around her neck. On the 2nd of November, she, Fanny, Myrtilla, and Dick were flogged for unstated evil doings. On Sunday, November the 17th, 1776, it seems Sally pretended to be sick yesterday afternoon, and Dick, like a fool, let her come away before the rest from Blue Castle, so that she went to a Negro house at 3 Mile River, where a mulatto daughter of old Mr. John Thompson lives, and told her she was sent from Egypt by Jenny Young to buy plantains. And while the woman stepped to another house, not doubting the truth of the story, not mistrusting her, she stole her work basket from several valuable cloths and got off clear with them. This mulatto woman was at my house as soon as I got up this morning with this complaint. I sent out immediately, but heard nothing of her. So Sally was quite cunning because she was like, listen, I'm not here from Thistlewood from Breadnut Pen. I'm here from Egypt and I'm here to get some plantain, right? And she lied to the old woman, stole her cloths, and ran away again, probably trying to cover herself up in clothes that didn't look like enslaved people's clothes. In the evening, Miss Bessie Callum Thompson, come and brought home Sally, whom she catched with Bessie's house at Mr. Gooden's pens, with part of her things. But there is wanting a silver thimble with the steel bottom, two cambric bedgowns, and at a pistole a yard, two children's shifts at 12 bits per yard, 4 yards, two white handkerchiefs with end borders, 7 bits each. Put Sally in the bilboes. On Monday morning, a search warrant was obtained, and Thistlewood gave one to Isaacs, a Jew constable, and lent him my horse. He rode to Mr. Gooden's pen and searched Mondays, the pen keeper who had previously harbored Sally, and Betty's houses, but found nothing. Paid him 10 shillings for his trouble. So see how the Jews were complicit? And even Thistlewood is noting who some of the Jews are. Sally, back in the bilboes, was flogged and chained and sent out to work in the garden. Thistlewood gave Bessie Callum, who lamented so much and behaved so mildly, £3 sterling, 13 shillings, and 6 dittos to amends in part. Syphox, brought on board at Lucia in April of 1665, had died before Thistlewood moved to the pen in 1767. Cujo, a Coromantee, with 8 other shipmates, was one of the lot purchased from Mr. Cuthbert on the slave ship Lucia. Excuse me. In 1770, he would have been about 25 years old. His record in that year was mainly of infirmity. In February, in mid-February, he was flogged for stealing pumpkins out of the provision ground. In April, he was unwell, for Thistlewood gave him Ward's red pill, but on the same day he was sent off to Friendship to join the rest of the gang. The next notable reference was in August, which happened Wednesday, August the 1st, 1770. Cujo wanting, meaning he ran away. He came home about noon. He got drunk at Kirkpatrick's at a burial last night. No punishment was recorded. It doesn't mean that no punishment happened. It just means that no punishment was recorded. Thistlewood had his customary amusements and punishments as well. Thursday, September the 4th, 1770. No, Tuesday, September the 4th, 1770. Cujo complains of his side and hip. Gave him a Ward's red pill and rubbed his hip with a camphorated rum. Suspect he has had a stroke there, although he won't confess to have received any hurt there. Thursday, October the 11th, 1770, here my Cujo eats ashes. So he might have been a dirt eater or an ash eater, which was a illness, but they punished the enslaved people for eating the dirt because they thought that it was some type of spiritual practice. In November, when the gang was once again working at Friendship, Cujo came home lame of his hip. Vine was summoned to bleed him, and he was sent back to work. A week later, he was home again with a pain in his back, but he continued in the field gang. Friday, September the 10th, 1770, about 1 o'clock this morning, was called up by Lincoln and others who said Cujo had fallen into the fire in a fit, got up and found him, brought him into the cook room, senseless, the Negroes thick about him, made them stand off to give him air, applied spirits of hartshorn, suspected his being drunk, which all to a single one denied. But Egypt Harry, who was damsel's husband, told me the truth, for which they hate him. It seems Cujo has been selling grass at the bay and brought home rum, drank a good deal by itself, and then more in hot punch, till it overcame him, after which the Negroes called me and joined to impose upon me. He went to his work this morning. He was flogged, not, it seems, for his escapade, but for using my shingles to wedge his hoe with. In August of 1774, Cujo's health really began to fail. He had suffered occasional ailments in 1772 and 1773, had run away once, and had been caught by a retrieved estate slave and brought home to a flogging, in June of 1773. He had suffered painful boils under his arms, for which he had been given the panacea of Ward's red pills, but his serious complaint was yet to come. Thursday, August 18th, 1774, Cujo got the clap. So, see, they were giving each other these sexually transmitted diseases because he had sexual relationships with Sally, and Sally kept getting the clap and running away, and she was tired of it, and she was probably also having sex with Cujo, who got the clap. Gave him a mercury pill. Tuesday, November 15th, 1774, that evening, Cujo come home from Massamure, ill of the clap again. He pisses blood. That evening gave him a dose of salt. He was sent to Dr. Drummond's for treatment and remained there for some time early in 1775, but the cure was certainly not complete. On Monday, October 23rd, 1775, almost a year later, Cujo pisses blood, wrote to Monsignors Drummond and Rucastle, and sent him to them. On the next day, Cujo returned with a box of pills and half a dozen bogies. At the end of November, he was still laid up wearing a bogie. A bogie is commonly prescribed in attempts to cure gonorrhea. A bogie was at the time described as a catheter probe, or rather a wax candle or a thin, flexible surgical instrument made small on purpose, dipped in oil, and passed gently through the urethra. Thistlewood knew them from bitter experience in the torment of wearing one. So Thistlewood had had this particular treatment himself, according to the author. On January 28th, 1776, Nanny came home from Blue Castle Estate sick, and Cujo was sent out to take her place. On Wednesday, January the 31st, 1776, Cujo came home from Blue Castle because he couldn't stand it. At the end of February, he was taken back to Drummond's hothouse and left there. He remained for 4 months. On Friday, June the 7th, 1776, at about 2 p.m., Cujo, home from Dr. Drummond's, greatly mended, if not quite well. On Tuesday, June 11th, 1776, Dr. Bell called to see me, got him to look at Cujo. his rupture being down, advised me to give him a wine glass of strong solution of salts till he had a stool every hour made sweet with sugar and molasses. Through the remainder of the year, Cujo suffered from his rupture, and 2 days before Christmas, he was put into a newly built watch hut in Birch Tree Provision Ground for good. He survived Mr. Thistlewood. So we don't know what happened to him or how he died, but he did live beyond the years of Thistlewood. Chubb, one of the 10 shipmates brought at Lucia, then he was a man boy. He would have been about 18 or 19 years old in 1770. At first in the field, he was taken out in mid February and put as a fisherman under the supervision of Egypt fisherman Cyrus. He suffered the fate of all of Thistlewood's fishermen. Monday, February 26, 1770, trimmed Chubb well for not coming till past 1 o'clock and bringing very little even then. In March, Thistlewood wrote to Mr. Hartnell at Egypt, complaining of the villainy of Cyrus and Chubb, who brought no fish, or very little, about enough for a cat. In May and twice in June, Chubb was severely beaten for bringing no fish. In July, Chubb and Cyrus both ran away. Nearly a week later, on August 1st, Chubb was brought back from Delve Estate. He was flogged, put in the bilboes, and given Johnny's, who had recently died, hoe, and put to field work. In 1771, he suffered an attack of the measles or some other disease, but recovered and continued as a field gang member. Thursday, October the 15th, 1772, received a letter from Mr. John Hartnell acquainting me of Chubb being very ill. I wrote to Dr. Drummond, rode to the Retrieve estate, got there about 10:30, went to see Chubb. Chubb remained in the Retrieve hothouse. On the Saturday, Thistlewood wrote to Hartnell to inquire about Chubb and Suki, also there with a fever. He was said to be a little better. They both recovered. In October of 1775, Chubb's final illness began. On the 19th, he came home from Retrieve Estate with a violent cold, fever, headache, and other symptoms. The weather had been very wet and cold. The next day, he was indeed very ill, and Thistlewood had him bled. That night, he died. Saturday, October the 21st, 1775, at night, the Negroes buried poor Chubb. I gave them a bottle of rum. You notice how they're always burying them at night? Because they can't miss their work day, not even for a funeral. That's something to keep in mind. So even how they celebrated the death of their loved ones was something that they regulated because they had to keep production going in the field. Bristol, not to be confused with Bess's son of the same name, was one of 10 purchased from Mr. Cuthbert at Lucia. He died before 1767. Jimmy, a Coromante or Shanti, was the youngest of the list and would have only been 15 or 16 years old in 1770, but he was already sowing his oats. He was not one of Thistlewood's favorites. On Sunday, May 20th, 1770, flogged Jimmy for getting drunk last night, burning a hole in my piazza floor, impudence, laziness, carelessness, and lying. In June, Jimmy was given mercurial pills and salts for a violent itching. We're going to talk about that more in the next chapter. Was also given brimstone and grease. On Sunday, November the 4th, 1770, at night, flogged Jimmy for misbehavior, impudence, and laziness. On Friday, November the 23rd, 1770, that evening, sent my Jimmy on Mackie horse to Friendship to charge my Negroes on coming home to keep to the King's Road. He galloped up as if life and death, like a madman. At night, put him in the bilboes. On Saturday, November the 24th, 1770, that morning, Jimmy and Damsel, an intolerable while fetching water, strapped them both with a manatee. So remember, a manatee strap is made from manatee skin, right? And it was an unusually cruel punishment that was later outlawed, but Thistlewood was still doing it. Wednesday, June 6, 1771, Jimmy is daily becoming more careless, stupid, and impudent through Abba's encouragement. On Thursday, October the 24th, 1771, locked Jimmy up in the cookroom, else no resting in the night. Such a noise going out in all the night long of him and the wenches. Attribute the death of Abba's child, born on the 17th of October, to his disturbing them in the night. Also locked him up once again when he spoke many impudent words. So he had attributed the death of Abba's child to this particular enslaved person, to Jimmy. On Friday, November 1st, 1771, Jimmy throwing the fire about the cookroom and being other ways very impudent, saying if this be living, he did not care whether he lived or died. You see that? So he was acting out and he said, if this is living, I don't care if I live or die. For that insolence, he was put in the bilboes. Saturday, November the 2nd, 1771, this morning took Jimmy out of the bilboes and gave him a flogging. So Jimmy, he was trying to beat it out of Jimmy. Friday, November the 15th, 1771, kept up all day and eat a little, but very uneasy. Take the bark at night, rested very poorly. Jimmy made me some warm beverage of lime juice, sugar, and water at night, and an hour or two after I had been in bed taking a drink. Verily, I thought I had been poisoned, as I really believe I should, had drank much more, tasted so strong of sublimate. Suspect him very much. He is very impudent, lazy, sly, and sullen. So he thought Jimmy had poisoned him. Sunday, the 12th of January, 1772, gave Jimmy 2 pounds of Russian drab breeches, pairs of Russia drab breeches, not yet half wore, but did not fit me, and began to wear 4 pair of new Russian drab breeches. Saturday, October 31st, 1772, as Jimmy did not come home until 5 p.m., he and Chubb had been sent out sailing and then drunk, and has lost his flour, put him in the bilboes, and gave Chubb a bit for selling the wild ducks. On Monday, November the 2nd, 1772, took Jimmy out of the bilboes about 8 a.m., flogged and pickled him, right? That's when they put that that brine on the back. on those open wounds, and then sent him to work with the field Negroes. Thursday, June 17th, 1773, caught Jimmy making up in the asparagus bunches, too much too large, supposed to part in the path. I had 4 bundles made into 5, and they too large. He makes a fool of Fibber, just as he pleases, and so do they all. On Saturday, the 4th of December, 1773, in the evening I shot 4 teal, yet got but 2 of them. Jimmy let one get away and stole another, for which I had him flogged. Friday, January 28th, 1775, Jimmy left the cook room in the middle of last night at the Negro houses. Saturday, April 9th, 1774, this evening perceived Jimmy has smallpox out upon him, which only discovered by accident. He says his head aches a little, but he has no fever. He was inoculated with the rest of my Negroes, but did not take the infection, so we concluded he had them before. Thursday, September 8th, 1774, flogged Jimmy for staying at Savannah Lamar near 2 p.m. and being in liquor. Sunday, December 11th, 1774, understand Jimmy wants to throw away Abba, he having long kept Phoebe slyly. Phoebe has also thrown away Neptune, or wants much to do it, upon Jimmy's account, a hopeful chap. So he's talking about their relationships. And Jimmy wanted to get rid of Abba, whose baby had died, because he was now sleeping with Phoebe, who used to sleep with Neptune. And Phoebe wanted to break up with Neptune. Wednesday, December 14th, 1774, flogged Jimmy and Phoebe for criminal conduct, right? Because they were messing around with each other. They were having an affair. Wednesday, the 4th of January, 1775, gave Jimmy a cob to buy me a piece of beef for corning this morning. He brought me 8¾ pounds, but said it cost the whole 10 bit. But on inquiry of Mr. Thomas Tomlinson, find he gave him a bit back and that it weighed 9¼ pounds. Wednesday, February 1st, 1775, as Jimmy was out last night, he says at Egypt, but doubtful, suspect his riding my horses, therefore fixed a chain to lock my pasture gate at night. Thursday, April 1775, gave Jimmy a dose of salts as he pretends to not be well, owing to his being up last night about his tricks with Phoebe. Wednesday, June 21st, 1775, flogged Jimmy for being from 7 to 2 p.m., selling 2 bits worth of fish and 2 drams of lima beans and 2 pounds of lima beans. Wednesday, July 5th, 1775, Jimmy come home about 2 p.m. in liquor. Tuesday, August 22nd, 1775, Jimmy came home 2:30 p.m. drunk, newspaper all frumpled, and suspect one of them lost. So Jimmy had a newspaper. Could Jimmy read? A few days before he had lost Thistlewood's letter and newspaper bag. He walked away again towards Savannah Lamar, and I saw him no more that night. August Thursday, August the 24th, 1775. Jimmy at home this morning, had him flogged, then gave him a new bill and a new hoe, and sent him by Lincoln to the Retrieve estate to work with the rest of my Negroes. Wrote to Mr. Hartnell by Lincoln, gave each a ticket, and gave Jimmy a bit to buy provisions till Sunday. Fresh branded on him, fresh branded him on the left shoulder with my mark, which was two T's encapsulated in a triangle, upside down triangle. He measures near 5 foot 3 inches high. Thursday, October the 26th, 1775, Jimmy has got the yaws, it seems. He is a lazy scoundrel. I dare say he has infected himself purposely. In 1776, he remained with the field gang out of Thistlewood's way and was now seldom mentioned except for two more outbreaks of yaws, one in April and another in October or November. Myrtilla, a Soko, bought on the shipboard from Mr. Cuthbert. She would have been about 24 years old in 1770. Her husband in 1767 had been Egypt driver Johnny, but in 1770 she lived with Dick. She was a field slave. Saturday, June 30th, 1770, Myrtilla dropped down in the field about 10:30 a.m. Imagine she fainted for more want of victuals, by what I can hear. She was drunk, I understand, having stolen Dick's rum. On Monday, the 3rd of December, she was flogged for not having come back with the others from Friendship Estate on the previous morning. She was apparently ill at the time, for she has been given Ward's red pill. Also, it seems she was put in the bilboes because Thistlewood thought she was pretending. On Thursday, December the 6th, 1770, this morning Myrtilla begging to be let out of the bilboes, and that she found herself well enough to go to work. Let her out and send her to Friendship. In May 1771, Myrtilla has got the clap and is very bad upon her. So she was kept on the pen and put to weed the garden. She was also from time to time seized with fits. On Wednesday, November the 18th, 1772, Myrtilla took with a bad fit, but in about an hour's time came to herself somewhat. Complaints of a violent pain in her neck and of three somebodies stretching her there. Who want her away? Thursday, November the 19th, 1772, Myrtilla complains much of her neck and is very low spirited. Her courses, or time as the Negroes call them, flows abundantly today. So she was on her period. For the remainder of November, she was ill. Vine bled her. Friday, May 21st, 1773, this morning, I had sex with Myrtilla outside. This was the second of only 3 times in these 7 years. In June, she was again briefly sick, but in November, Myrtilla had got the clap badly. On Tuesday, July 26th, 1773, about 2 p.m., Myrtilla took with a fit such as she has had before, which held near 3 hours before she could speak. On these occasions, she seems to have been left to recover as she now did, and then later was given medicine, usually a dose of salts, except for one more flogging in August of 1776 for impudence. We can leave her. Peggy, also purchased at Lucia in 1765, would have been about 21 or 22 years old in 1770. Her history during 1770 to 1776 was comparatively unremarkable. She was not reported as having a husband or sweetheart. She bore no children. Between the 23rd November and the 30th of December 1775, Thistlewood took her 5 times. He had until then ignored her, and he took her only once again in July of 1776. She suffered relatively seldom, and then with very minor ailments. She seems to have not caught the clap. She never ran off, and only one flogging was recorded at the end of August 1774. Flogged Peggy for eating dirt. Suki caught her in the fact. Phoebe, a Coromante, would have been about 17 years old in 1770. In 1767, when only about 14 years old, she had been matched with Egypt Neptune, and in 1770 was still his wife, though Jimmy would later take him from her. So Jimmy was a player, right? Her story in 1770 was generally unremarkable. In the course of that year, Thistlewood took her 5 times. Towards the end of the year, she developed a sore on her leg, for which in 1770 she was occasionally treated. In 1771, she was occasionally treated. Wednesday, July 10th, 1771, at night gave Phoebe a mercurial pill as her leg is breaking out again. In 1771, Thistlewood took her only twice. The next year was more eventful for her. Tuesday, January 21st, 1771, discovered by accident that Phoebe's sore leg is broke out, which she concealed, had her flogged and put in the bilboes for having a diseased leg and not telling him. And how did he find out by accident? Was he trying to have her to mount her and he found it and he saw it? Tuesday, February the 11th, 1772. Phoebe's sore being healed over led her out of the bilboes and put her to weeding in the garden. Early in that year, Thistlewood's field gang were sent to work on Mount Pleasant Estate, Orange Bay, and Hanover. He visited them from time to time. On one such visit, he notes that on Friday, April the 17th, 1772, Phoebe ill of pain in her side, and they all looked very poorly. Mr. Hayward's all well, the estate's Negroes excessively sickly, the hothouse full. Phoebe was then about 6 months pregnant, presumably for Egypt Neptune, who had set out from Egypt on Saturday, May 23rd, to visit her at Mount Pleasant. He lost his way, was seized on Half Moon Estate by a driver and locked in the stocks. There he stayed until report of his misfortune reached the Mount Pleasant overseer, Mr. James Wedderburn, who had him released on the 31st. Meantime, on another visit to Mount Pleasant on May 29th, Thistlewood ordered Lincoln and Phoebe to return to Breadnut Island on Saturday the 31st. They were delayed by Neptune's arrival, and on the 1st of June, with a note of explanation from Mr. Wedderburn. All three arrived from at the pen. On Sunday, July 5th, Phoebe had a son. He died on the 11th of the common cause, jaw falling. In July of 1773, the story was repeated. Another son, born on the 29th, 27th, he died August 2nd in the same year. Her leg sore broke out again. On Monday, October the 18th, 1773, Phoebe's leg not so well, so she is at home doing sundries in the garden. 2 days later, Thistlewood visited her there. He had left her alone in 1772, taken her once in January 1773, and now resumed more frequent attention. Between the 20th of October, 1773, and the 4th of August, 1774, he took her 11 times more. At the end of 1773, and again in April of 1774, Phoebe was reported ill of stomach trouble for which she was given a Ward's red pill and a blood flux for which she was given a dose of rhubarb. Again in May, she complained of pains in her belly, not surprisingly, for she was then again 5 months pregnant. Saturday, September 3rd, 1774, sent Phoebe and Fanny for Mrs. Edwards to see, who thinks they are near their time. On Monday, September the 5th, 1774, as Phoebe and Fanny are now very big, sent them to Mrs. Edwards this evening to lay in and to give her 2 pistoles each. About noon on the 9th, Phoebe was delivered of a boy at Mr. Edwards. This was Tony. On Wednesday, the 19th of October, 1774, gave Phoebe 3 bits to buy 1.5 yards of osnabrig for a tie cloth. The laying in over, Phoebe went to garden work. Friday, June 30th, 1775, come Phoebe in new garden, backward standing up, behind the indigo. Lincoln strap and Suki sticking beans covering beds. In July, the gang were at Retrieve Estate. Phoebe came home with her child ill. She remained on the pen for the next couple of months, during which Thistlewood took her 3 times, before noting on September 22nd that she seemed to be breaking out with yaws again. In February 1776, Phoebe was home again from Blue Castle Estate with her Tony. They both went down with chickenpox in April. Thistlewood noted another assault upon her. In July, he flogged her for wishing she was dead already. She was again lame and laid up until Monday, September 9th, when she returned to work. So he beat her because she told him she wished she was dead already, and he beat her for it. We're almost done, guys. Frankie, let's see. How much more do we have to go? We don't have much more to go. Frankie, another of the 10 shipmates, about 18 years old in 1770, was also in the field gang. Her husband was Egypt Louis. She was also a favorite of Mr. Thistlewood, who had her 33 times over this period of time. Others, as we shall see, also found her attractive. She had a husband, and Thistlewood was having her anytime he wanted. Thursday, November the 8th, 1770, Egypt Louis bought me 13 crabs as a present. He keeps my Frankie. Thursday, August 8th, 1771. Last night about midnight, Egypt Louis caught Mr. Hayward's Tom come to Frankie. Fought before my door till I parted them. They disturbed me very much. In September 1772, when Abel was lying in, Frankie was taken into the house to assist Fibba. Sunday, November 1st, 1772, sent Frankie to Savannah Lamar and gave her a bit for her loss of time. She found that Jimmy had lost his flour at Old Cecilia's at Kirkpatrick and brought them. Up to this time, Frankie had reportedly suffered only occasional aches and pain. But in November of 1772, she was ill for a longish period. Monday, November 30th, 1772, Frankie laid up again of her belly. Suspect she has the clap. Gave her the mercurial pill in the evening. In May 1773, she was ill again and had to come home from the gang work on Blue Castle Estate. Thistlewood had her bled, but for some days she continued unwell with pain under her right breast. On December the 8th, Thistlewood took her in the garden among the lima beans, and it was perhaps then that he first observed Frankie's sore worse, made her laid up. So this is where he recognized that, oh crap, maybe she is really sick. By the beginning of 1774, the sore was plainly yaws, so he made her go out to work with the rest. They were off to Blue Castle again. The ailment persisted. Friday, July 29th of 1774, began to give Frankie sarsaparilla diet drink for the yaws, some of them beginning to dry naturally. Monday, September the 19th, 1774, Frankie in the gardens weeding. Now she is now almost well, has a small sore on one leg, which was the yaw's mother, but has now no visible yaws about her. It looks well, however, still continues to drink the sarsaparilla. So although he himself complaining of a bad headache, an outbreak of boils, and a not near well on the 22nd, they went to the garden bench, and, as was almost always the case with any of the women, he gave her 2 bits. Thursday, February 1st, 1776, Frankie come home from Blue Castle, pains in her back, she pretends. She was flogged and put in the bilboes. Tuesday, February the 13th, 1776, she was back at the pen. Can't cut the cane, she pretends, for her back. Sent her to burning off dry logwood in the pasture. The price of logwood when he was at the vineyard had been 13 or 14 pounds per ton. Now, since mid 1775, it will scarce fetch a third that price. On Friday the 1st and Saturday the 16th of March, he came with Frankie, and late on the night of the 24th, Frankie miscarried. Her belly was pretty big. So you see that he had no regard for these women's pregnancies or anything. He just was there caring about his own sexual appetite. Excuse me. Damsel, a shamboy, and a house slave, was reckoned to be the same age as Frankie, her shipmate. In May of 1767, she had made a match with Harry at Egypt. She apparently left him some time before 1771. She had no children before coming to the pen, and in June 1771 she had a miscarriage. By November of that year, for certain, she was clear of Egypt's herring. Wednesday, November 20th, 1771, my damsel, having been at the bay last night to see her husband, who was Mrs. North's George, got bit terribly on the thigh by a dog with a dog. She concealed it, but I found it, had it dressed, flogged her well, and put her in the bilboes. Tuesday, December the 3rd, 1771, gave damsel a ward's red pill, took her out of the bilboes till evening, and put her in again. Friday, September 11th, 1772, between 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening, damsel was brought to bed of a girl, Nellie, by Kirkpatrick, old grand fibber. Saturday, April the 9th, 1774, received for asparagus 2 bits. Note, 3 bits worth bought back by damsel, who is a very indifferent market woman. Wednesday, October the 5th, 1774. This morning I found another goose dead in the goose house. Had damsel well flogged for not telling of it. Her sullenness, she never cleans the goose house out. Wednesday, November the 9th, 1774, had sex with damsel outside. Damsel must have been someone special. Not that he took her often. This was the first of only 8 times in 7 years, but she always got, perhaps demanded, 4 bits instead of 2. On Sunday, April the 16th, 1775, damsel was again in childbirth. This time, tended by Egypt Grand Quashiba, she pronounced a son, Kwashi, on the 20th of May. She got her tie cloth money, which was 3 bits. On January 1776, damsel made her match with Solon, who had been abandoned by Maria. In April, she and Nellie caught the chicken pox, and in September, Kwashi had the yaws, but they all survived. Bess, as we know, was not Thistlewood's property. At the age of 11, right, Bess had been given by Miss Bennet for Fibber for her lifetime and then to go to Mulatto John. The transfer had been executed in John's name simply because he was a free person. Legal responsibility for her therefore rested with Mr. Thistlewood. Not surprisingly, Bess, who would have been about 16 years old in 1770, was a house slave. At first apparently housed with Dick, she had by 1770 moved into the Thistlewood cookroom with Damsel and Jimmy, and temporarily Sally. Abba had her own house. At the beginning of 1770, Bess was being treated by Dr. Drummond for an unspecified illness. Her medicines included boluses, which were large pills, and she was, it seems, for a long time required to wash with an ointment. The ailment later proved to be venereal. So something Thistlewood or one of the other enslaved people gave her. Wednesday, November 21st, 1770, in the morning, flogged Bess for not bathing as ordered in a morning for her sickness, had words with Fibber. Bess remained sickly at the start of 1771, and in late June suffered a miscarriage. In July, she was sent to Miss Bessie Murray to learn dark mark, to darn and mark. Sunday, November 3rd, 1771, heard a drumming last night at the Negro House, got up and went to see. It proved Bess beating upon a gourd. In the evening had words with Fibba about her ill humors. Also locked Jimmy, Bess, and Damsel up in the cookroom. In August of 1772, Bess was brought to bed of a boy named Bristol. It was a painful labor, presided over by Kirkpatrick, old Fibba. They were obliged to tie her. She was so unruly. At the beginning of November, Bess has got a running again. Either fresh or the old one has returned. At the end of 1774, Bess was said to have made a match with Mr. White's coffee. In 1775, she came also to the attention of Mr. Thistlewood 3 times. In January 1776, Bristol fell ill of a bad breaking out. It was not his first disorder. In 1774, he had swallowed a fish bone through Bess's careless manner in feeding him, said Thistlewood, and Dr. Samuel Bell, who attended him, gave him a vomit to bring it out. In December of 1775, he had been ill and subjected to bleeding, but all this he supervised. On December 25th, 1776, with Egypt's Kwashiba in attendance, Bess delivered another boy. By March 10th, Mother and Grand had given him up. Thistlewood called them bad nurses indeed, for the child was not yet dead, but he lasted only another day. Bess seems always to have had hard times with childbirth. She now continued ill through most of April and May, and in early May Bristol was also ill, swelled as if he had the dropsy. He was given a mercury pill and rhubarb. On Tuesday, the 9th of 1776, my Bess and one of Mr. Wilson's new Negroes named Jimmy have made a match. Fanny. This was Mr. Say's slave, who, with Strap, was bought by Thistlewood in 1773. She was probably a Creole, for on Thursday, August 11th, 1774, she was given leave to go and see her cousin, the late Mr. Mitchell's girl. In October, she and Phoebe had been sent to Mr. Edwards to have their babies. Fanny had a girl named Patty who died on April 1st, 1775. On Sunday, February the 26th, 1775, received a note from Mr. Thompson, the overseer over at Islay Estate, by Dick. Fanny's pickaninny sick last Tuesday, and she did nothing. Saturday, March 25th, 1775, about noon, Fanny come home. Her child ill with of the flux. Saturday, April 1st, 1775, about noon, Fanny's child died, had it buried. On Monday, the 3rd, Fanny was at the pen, sulky and threatening to make away with herself, very obstinate. The next day, when put with Phoebe to weed, she was very refractory, and Thistlewood threatened her very much. She soon was sent back to the field gang. Through 1775 and 1776, she remained with them, and sometimes ill, but not very seriously, sometimes said to be unwilling to go to work. And in February 1776, She was punished for that reason. In the bilboes and flogged. Thistlewood took her once. Strap was, to his misfortune, tried out as a fisherman. Tuesday, August the 28th, 1774, he brings nothing at night and only brought 3 bullheads today for dinner, flogged him and sent him to work in the field. Wednesday, August the 7th, 1774, at home, lame of a toe, put him in the bilboes. Sunday, September 25th, 1774, flogged Strap for losing part of yesterday. Sunday, October 9th, 1774, am told Strap is exceedingly lazy and good for nothing, steals cane. Later in the month, he was put under treatment for crab yaws, and Phoebe was sent to Macemuir in his place. And much later, in August of 1776, he got another flogging for mistreatment of a horse. Joe, a new Negro boy purchased in December 1775 from Mr. James Wedderburn at an incredible price indeed. By the end of 1776, served as Thistlewood's attendant for a year, during which he seems to have avoided the whip, but he could not avoid all ills. On Friday, September the 24th, 1776, Joe got the yaws. At least it is greatly feared he has it. So, as you can see, Thistlewood documented things meticulously. And in his documentation of things, he noted when he had sex with these people, how much money they were bringing in. And he was a piss poor slave owner because he often found himself in debt to people either because of his slaves or actually indebted to his slaves. And I think that sometimes when we talk about slavery, we talk about it only from the United States American context, and we don't talk enough about it from the Caribbean context where enslaved people were actually paid. They were given bits. He was handing out bits and 2 and 3 cents and a few shillings here and there to these women that he was sexually assaulting. He was doing different things. Jimmy was given time to come back. Yeah, Jimmy was given time to come back. Sorry, I missed that comment. But yeah, we have all of this evidence that he gave his enslaved people money. He gave them the opportunity to earn money. He put them in positions where they had financial resources. They just didn't have enough to take care of themselves without him. Greetings, Moana Hagaziki. How are you this evening?
I'm good, Matron. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
This was a long one tonight, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very long, but like I said, I try to get through a chapter every time we come together with the books now because you guys like it better that way. So sometimes we go long, and this was a long chapter.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I thought that since you was willing to give your time,
Mhm,
I had to been willing to listen to it because I was really I think I offered the well I asked you to read the book, so I should stay and listen to you actually read the book. That was important. But some takeaways from your reading because I took some notes. I took
mhm,
some notes and I put it in the chat. One of
mhm.
the first things that I took away was the infantilization of adults, the systematic infantilization of adults.
Mhm.
When you talked about the fact that grown men used to be so afraid of punishment, they would run away. It's like because naturally, grown men don't get beatings with with belts. It's
Exactly.
so crazy. It's so crazy. And one of your favorite words. well, one of the words that you use in your readings is natural increase.
Mm-hmm.
Natural increase. And there are other things that could be ascribed to that word natural. Natural commerce. A man who goes out every day and he uses his labor, and from that labor he is able to trade, he is able to exchange goods and services. He is able to through his natural labor,
Mm-hmm.
reap the rewards and benefit of what he does. But if you live in a system when someone is actively removing that, and they are fundamentally taking care of all these things. They're taking care, he was taking care of the health, he was taking care in terms of commerce, because they would go out and work for him and bring him all of the goods, and in exchange he would sell those goods or use those people to sell those goods, and in
Mm-hmm.
return they would return the money back to him. That feature, when that feature is removed from an adult person, you know you know you no longer have that agency of understanding commerce, how commerce works, and all the other features that goes along with commerce. So when you fast forward that dynamic 400 years, you would see why black men and women are in a shortfall in terms of doing business, because we were cut out of that market for so long.
Mm-hmm.
You learn certain things and engaging in business and business practices. Now, make no mistake, this business practice he was engaged in was a horrible one, but you learn things. And if you deny a man the natural process or progression and understanding commerce and understanding labor, you remove him from that, and you basically take care of all these things. You understand there'll be a shortfall. There'll be a shortfall in terms of competition, because they are at the table competing every day, understanding how these systems work, etc., etc., etc. Where their workers or their slaves are denied the ability to be a part of that institution itself. So that's what I kind of, one of the things I learned from that when you talk about natural increase, because you could ascribe that to a whole lot of different kinds of other things as well. What do you think about that?
I think that's a very good observation. That is a good call out because when you take away a person's ability to even learn how the system works because all they have been reduced to is a cog in the wheel and they know that they have to turn or they have to give him that money or they have to go out and fish and grab fish or they have to go and work for someone else. They have no part in the negotiations. They have no part in the debits and credits. They have no part in the balancing of the books. They have no part in anything other than their small worker position, which is the position that a lot of Black people are still in to this very day because we don't stress entrepreneurship because I am actually of the mind that all jobs that you work for other people are apprenticeships until you, even if you make $100,000 a year or what people consider to be good money, 40, $50,000 a year, whatever you consider to be good money, that's still only an apprenticeship because somebody has to cut that check. Ball players are just apprenticing until they can figure out a way to start their own business and work for themselves and do it independently. So, yes, they took away that drive, that knowledge, that information from us, and then they hid from us that aspect of business. And then we only copied the very worst parts of their behavior, which is what they showed us of themselves.
Yeah, and relegated us to a labor class.
Yeah.
This is why most black people, when they get out of university or college or learn certain things, the first thing they want to do in terms of like earning commerce and things of that nature is to get a job. Yeah,
Hmm.
but these things was taught a long, long way back when. Another thing that you mentioned in reading is uh, infertilization, because
Hmm.
when you read about the pairing of the slaves, so many of them didn't have children. Where are the children, matron? Where are the children?
Hmm.
So obviously, this guy, I personally think, through his sexual activities and diseases, the women became like infertile.
Hmm.
it's crazy. I mean, it's like you pairing women and men together, and none of them are. And it's not to say that every woman reproduces to have a child, but so many of them didn't. And I find that to be fascinating. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he had this desire to be with all of the women sexually, right? And he took them, and it seemed like a part of his uh a part of the eroticism for him was the fact that he had paired these women with men, and then he would go back and sexually conquer the women. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it seemed like he got off on that. And it's interesting that they all kept catching the clap, and they all kept catching, the venereal diseases, even though he didn't talk about his sexual exploits with these women, but based on his past behavior and how meticulously he documented it, I think that the author just got tired of noting that he was having sex with this one and that one and this one and that one. And he leaves us some clues about his sexual behavior. But I think that, yes, they probably had what we would now call pelvic inflammatory disease, and they were probably rendered infertile because they kept having sex with this man that kept giving them the clap.
Two other things I want to address. One is penis envy,
Hmm.
because for the life of me, it would seem that Thistlewood was jealous of Jimmy, or one of
Hmm.
the. I think it was Jimmy.
Yep, it
And
was
I'm
Jimmy.
thinking to myself, how in the world could you be jealous of your slave?
Because
I said,
Jimmy was
slave.
going behind Thistlewood, the women that Thistlewood was having sex and blowing their backs out. Can you imagine? Can you imagine your Thistlewood and you're maybe 5 to 7 inches, your average for a white man or whatever, and then Jimmy, who is King Kong, who was like 12 inches or whatever, and he is just murdering these women sexually, and they are like more accepting of Jimmy, right, in this sexual dynamic because he's more on their level, and they don't have the power differential that they had with Thistlewood because he no longer documents whether these women were coerced into these relationships or whether he just took them. He just says that Thistlewood had her, and in that's a very gentle way of saying that he raped her. You know what I'm saying?
True,
So
true, true, true. But matron, what do you? If I'm a slave master, what do I care if I'm satisfying my female slave sexually? I'm just trying to get off. My, I'm not trying to make them. I mean, if they feel good, wonderful. But I don't care if they do or not.
mhm,
Because I'm trying to get off. So it like a on a psychological level, I could attribute this to the same thing where in today's society you hear Trump have an
mhm.
issue, and I don't mean to bring politics into this discussion,
You're fine. You're
but
fine.
his issues with Obama,
Hmm.
and Trump is a multi-billionaire. He's a billionaire. If Barack Obama had Trump's money, that would be a thing. If he had even his influence, I don't even think Barack Obama had the same kind of influence that Trump has right now. He has a cultish following. But
Hmm.
even with all these things, it seems that he is still envious of Barack Obama, and I have to wonder what it is. And it goes back to this whole thing: Why is a slave master jealous of his slave? I'm not calling Obama a slave, but I'm saying in terms of black power dynamic and white power dynamic in the United States. It's just a fascinating thing to me.
It's very fascinating. It's almost as if they want the black man to have so little that the little bit of pride or the little bit of influence that they do have, they want to take that and erode that from him as well. I think that they want the black man to have absolutely nothing, no social capital, no actual capital, nothing, no spiritual capital, nothing, because only then will they feel like they are superior. And I think it's because they inherently know that we are made in the image of God, because the dirt is black and
Sure.
brown.
Sure,
And if God made man from the dirt of the earth, what color was God making man
sure,
in his own image?
sure,
And
sure.
I think that it goes back to that.
It's a deep seated kind of psychology going on because I think that the
Hmm.
universe give us a little something. But needless to say, I'll end on this. The idea of Thistlewood owing his slaves, because if you remember now, he used to borrow money from some of his slaves.
Yes, he was a broke. Yeah, he was a brokey.
I, I'm asking myself, how is it that a slave master has to borrow money from his slave? That's some twisted shit. Yeah,
And then this
never heard of
man
it.
who has the power to beat you, whip you, punish you, right? Has the ability, like you only had his honor to even get your money back. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you didn't even
Yeah,
have any guarantees that you would get your money back because,
that's true. That's true. Where you
yeah,
gonna go? You gonna take it to court?
yeah, you didn't have the right to go to court until
Yeah.
they came up with the Fiscals and Protectors of Slaves, which didn't come until the early 19th century. So, and we'll talk about that in the book Driver when we read that book, where we talk about the Fiscals and the Protectors of Slaves, which were which was this judicial body in the Caribbean that would go hear the complaints of enslaved people. So they
I never
did.
knew that, man. I
Yeah,
never knew that.
that's new. That was new information for me as well. And when you think about it, it's like these enslavers were borrowing money from their enslaved population because they were paying them, and these enslaved people in some instances lived better than the poor whites, which was a
That's
whole
very
nother
interesting.
problem or challenge for them because they had money and there were things that they did not have to spend their money on.
That's true. That is true. That is true. One last thing before you go. You keep mentioning the lady Nani. This is not the same Nani in
No,
terms of, okay.
no,
I was
not
wondering about that.
that is not the Haitian nanny. No.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you for the reading, and I know it's late. I know everyone got to get up in the morning as usual, but I
Yeah,
appreciate your time, sister. I really
I
do.
appreciate your time as well. Sister Raw had a couple of comments for us. She said, what she heard me saying is that if we're not working for ourselves, we are still a slave. And that is something that I do fundamentally believe in, that employment is just another form of slavery. They updated the system and they changed some of the titles around. They gave you a little bit more money and a lot more responsibility. And when you look at things like urban slavery, where you got to pick where you lived, you got to pay for your own health care, you got to walk around, you didn't necessarily need a day pass like you needed passes to leave the plantation. You had a seasonal pass to go and work for someone, but you took all your money back to your employer. They were the ones who controlled the larger part of your income. Then we are still urban slaves to this very day if you are working for someone. That's why you have to look at every job as an apprenticeship, an opportunity for you to learn skills and have an opportunity to gain knowledge and information so that you are able to go out there and take that and build something for yourself.
I wouldn't completely agree with Raw with that analysis, and the
Hmm.
reason the reason is because it would be very unfair
Mm,
to say that I was in the same position as Thomas Cecilwood slaves,
mhm,
even though even though like you say, I depend depend on going to a place or whatever. The difference is, first of all, I could leave whenever the hell I want to and
mm,
find another place to go. You
mhm,
know, and the slaves on the Thistlewood plantation, if they left and came back, they would get a lashing. I don't know if
mhm.
that happens like now. I don't know if you I don't know if you leave a business and come back to that business, if the boss will lash you. Then there is sexual assault. There's
Mhm,
sexual assault. So I wouldn't. I think Thistlewood used to use the word wife very loosely.
mhm,
I think that when we call ourselves a slave in 2027, 2026, I think that we're using that word very loosely after reading the things the slaves what actually slavery is and what
Hmm.
slaves actually had to go through. I think that is a bit of a difference, and I think it's unfair to put myself in the same category as those people. That's unfair.
I can agree with that, but I also have to add to that how many times have you left an employer and tried to go back to an employer and been denied employment because you left?
No, I
How
don't try
many?
to go back. I don't try to go back. No, hey, Lord, before I leave, I'm planning to make my exit. So I mean,
Mhm.
I understand that, I understand
Yeah.
that, and ultimately, the goal is to learn what you can, so you could find a way to do it for yourself. So
Mhm.
that's my in employing in being employed in things of that nature. I try to learn what I can, how the business functions, not just one part of it, the whole part of it. So because eventually the plan is to leave and do the same goddamn things for myself. That's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And then she said, "You can't think them Caucasoids tell the truth because the truth aren't in them. They have to come forward, understand, overstand, and we do have to understand that they are not telling the truth about all of the different things that they wrote about, even in Thistlewood's diaries, even in this book. I think that there are a lot of things that the author left out. There were over 10,000 pages of these diaries and these documents. And I think that as time went on, he got exhausted with the process. And I think he left some things out. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that because one of the things that you mentioned in reading is this anal prolapses.
yeah,
This the fact that they're right. So why is that happening? I'm
right.
thinking that a lot of that women was getting boogered.
Yeah,
They was getting boogered. So this was the result of these kinds of things. What was going on? So like I say, I do believe a lot of things is left out in
mhm,
terms of the history of slaves, but you still got to read what's there.
yeah, absolutely. Oh, now African culture and education wanted to know, were you talking about Nanny of the Jamaican Maroons? Is that who you meant? Because I'm not sure if that's the
Yeah, I'm
nanny.
talking about Nani of the Jamaican Maroons, not the
Okay.
Haitian one. I don't know if it's
Okay.
the Haitian one. I just know
Okay.
about the Jamaican Maroons. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I'm not sure if this is the one, and I will do some research and have an answer for you next week. Well, no, on Thursday. I'll have an answer for you on Thursday. I'm going to do some research and see what I can find. If that was that nanny or if this was a different nanny, because nanny was a common name because it was a common function of plantations to have an older African woman take care of the children so that some of the enslaved labor could go out and work. But a lot of times they force those women to take those babies with them out into the fields. So it just depends. So I will check to see if I can find any information out to let you know whether or not that was the Jamaican nanny.
Okay. Good night, matron man. Thank you
All
for
right.
the time again.
Good night. Thank you for the time. I want to thank Culture Education, Sister Rob, Bawana Haguziki, the Forecast Radio, Anthony McPhail, and everyone else that was out there listening. I appreciate you for being here. I know that this was a long show, and I apologize for that, but we're trying to get through a chapter each time we come together. Thank you for being here, and I will talk to you soon. I know that there are others of you that are listening, and I want you to know that I appreciate you and the support that you give my channel. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like the content so that I can get into the algorithm. All right, guys, thank you. Peace.